I don't really want to take too much time speaking. I want to rather engage in a conversation and listen to what
Great.
the ideas are from the planning board here. I do want to take just a moment to discuss kind of where we are, as well as a couple of proposals that I put forward in the legislature for this session. And I'll start with just stating some facts that were recited today. The governor had a bill put forward today, a housing bond bill that I think will actually get some traction this term. I'm hopeful that we'll pass it, and it'll be devoted to affordable housing development. State bond money going towards the development of affordable housing and the maintenance and increasing of our housing authorities and the units that they control and purchase and family homes or condos hit their highest level ever in June in Massachusetts in history. It's up 6.2% from last year. And that represents the 15th month in a row that we've had a year-over-year increase on median housing prices. 15 months in a row of increases. It is, along with healthcare, to me, the biggest issue we are facing in the Commonwealth for our Commonwealth. For our economic security, for our quality of life, for our diversity in our communities, and frankly, for our public health. I think we're in an affordable housing crisis in the Commonwealth here. And you see this playing out, and I can pivot to what's happening here in Winchester, where the median housing price in Winchester is far higher than it is in Massachusetts generally. Winchester is, as one of your members had told me earlier, red hot, white hot pricing, median pricing for housing here in town. It is an extraordinary market right now in Winchester, and you're seeing a lot of individuals complaining about tear downs because the price of the land is so valuable in Winchester right now. And so what you're also seeing is 40B, which is the state's affordable housing law, being used as a cudgel by developers who are coming in to take advantage of that law, frankly, to the detriment of many of our neighborhoods in town here. The intent of 40B, which by the way is 50 years old, is to encourage and force communities that have been historically resistant to the development of affordable housing to accept affordable housing in their boundaries. And Winchester, frankly, has been one of those communities that historically has been resistant to the development of affordable housing. I believe our numbers are still shy of 4% of our affordable housing stock currently. The target for 40B back in the 60s when it was passed was 10%. So Winchester still has a ways to go. That said, I think there should be a lot of credit given to the current officials, both this board as well as the Board of Selectmen, in realizing what's going on and taking steps, which include the housing partnership that's been developed here in Winchester, as well as the housing production plan that the town has recently embraced and is in the process of creating. I think those are very positive steps. I know with our meetings with Mass Housing, when we're discussing some of the issues facing Winchester, those have been very well received and will continue to be well received, and the positive steps that Winchester has been taking are not going to be for naught. Mass Housing, as you've seen during the Forest Ridge proposal, took a much harder look at that than I think they may have done otherwise because of the nature of that project. As opposed to where most everyone in the community that I know of has been opposed to that, given the safety concerns, given the density of that project, the nature of the location. It was just a bad project. And Mass Housing, to their credit, again, took a very hard look at that, and as a result, you've seen that project be pulled and held in abeyance currently. So two pieces of legislation that I've sponsored, and I've co-sponsored a number of others, but I'll just talk about these two that I've sponsored that focus specifically on 40B. One is H657. That's it. Yep.
We've all got it.
Okay. And so that's an act, a resolve to establish a special commission to study 40B and to make recommendations on 40B. What you're seeing in the legislature now, and what I've seen since I've been in, is a real battle between urban legislators and suburban and rural legislators for the most part, where urban legislators, and I say those from big cities, are saying, we've got affordable housing here. We've got well more than 10%, much more excessive development than 10%. Get your act together, and we're not touching 40B until you do so. And whenever you take a run at it and attempt to open up 40B, it comes down quickly. And the wall slams down very quickly on any discussion about moving that bill or taking away pieces of that bill. So what this commission would do would have a 9-member commission, including the Secretary of Housing, including the Secretary of Transportation, including the Secretary of the municipalities, as well as chair people from the Senate and House Committee on Municipalities, and appointees from the House and Senate as well, to go out and conduct 14 public hearings around the Commonwealth, in cities, in suburban communities, in rural communities, around the Commonwealth, have a listening tour essentially to hear from the municipalities and the towns that are being impacted by 40B. Those that are in favor of it, those that are opposed to it, and those that believe, as I do, we need to alter the strictures of 40B. They would then have to report back to the legislature, which would be the mechanism to justify cracking open 40B, the way we've done with the foundation budget review in the education context. Chapter 70 is education, the foundation budget. For years, legislators have said we're not going to touch it. We went into 93, we don't need to touch that. We were able to get the Foundation Budget Review Commission to go through, come out with a concrete set of proposals and recommendations. That is now serving as the vehicle that we're using this term to open up that Chapter 70 funding formula, because it showed that we weren't properly educating our children, we weren't adequately funding our educational system. It wasn't just an ethereal commentary from certain legislators, it was now a report from a bipartisan commission that came back and said it. Same idea behind this commission here. They'd go out within a short period of time, conduct these hearings, come back and make a report to us, which we could then use as a vehicle to open up 40B, and do so in a comprehensive but also a measured way, with, again, feedback from every walk of life in the Commonwealth and every community. The other piece that I filed is H658, which is an act to promote affordable housing. This would essentially codify a lot of the regulations that Mass Housing has put in place already regarding a safe harbor provision for towns. It would take that out of what could be changed with the regulations and make it law. I also increased the timing of the safe harbor provision. So currently, if you've got a housing production plan in place and approved and certified by the CDHD, DCHD, sorry, that's good for 5 years. That's your plan for your town. And this is what Winchester's embarked on now. That's your plan for how you're going to increase your affordable housing over the next 5 years. Get certified by DCHD and accepted. If you then make incremental gains during a given year, you get what's essentially called a safe harbor provision, where no 40B will be entertained because you're on the pathway towards the proper numbers. Currently, if you achieve 0.5% of your goal in 1 year, you get a 1-year safe harbor. If you achieve 1% of your goal in a given year, you get a 2-year safe harbor provision. My bill would increase that to 2 and 3 years respectively. So if you achieve 0.5%, you get a 2-year safe harbor. If you achieve 1%, you get a 3-year safe harbor. With the idea being that communities are now, communities that are taking positive steps to move towards increased affordable housing should be allowed to continue that planning. They shouldn't be then subject to what you're seeing here, which is developers coming in over the top and saying, that's nice, you've got a plan to increase affordable housing, we're just going to come in and drop this.
And get the benefits of doing that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it allows the town to say, we're taking this seriously, as Winchester's doing now. We're taking this seriously, we're going to start measuredly increasing our affordable housing in a way that we can control, in a way that the density that comes with affordable housing makes sense for the town. So you're not seeing developments, frankly, out in the middle of nowhere, without access to mass transportation, without access to what individuals who need affordable housing would actually need. It allows the town to take control back over their planning, frankly, and their development. But it still keeps in that stick underneath that says you have to continue on your path towards developing affordable housing. So those are the two main proposals that I've got. Again, I've co-sponsored a number of different pieces of legislation, and I do believe that we've got some real traction here, given that the housing market is booming statewide, and other communities are now facing exactly what Winchester's facing, in that all these developers are coming in, and again, really perverting what the purpose of 40B was, to come in and and lay their projects down at a healthy profit margin for themselves. So those are the two. As I said, I don't want to prattle on for too long. I'd be more than happy to just entertain a conversation, and I know we've spoken before. We were able to have Mass Housing come in to kind of defang them, I think, from folks who don't have any exposure to them, who don't know what they do, and also to let Mass Housing know what we've been doing. So I was able to convene a couple meetings here with some different folks around the table, as well as members of the board, the selectmen and others, to really explain what they want to look for and what they want to see in communities. And I can say that they've been pleasantly surprised, I think, by Winchester's progress, which bodes well for us going forward.
Sure. Okay, I didn't want to cut you off, but I did want to take the opportunity, Representative Day, not only to thank you again for coming, but I think your very eloquently presented comments, your dedication to the professionalism of this topic is a perfect example of why Winchester and Stoneham are so happy to have you representing our communities. And I wanted to thank you for all of your work on behalf of our communities, not just on this area with respect to these two proposed bills, but also all of your work on behalf of our communities. So I just wanted to take a second and just make sure that you are aware of how appreciative the communities are of all of your work on our behalf. So thank you so much. And I think your comments, as I say, are just a perfect example of how grateful we are to have your level of expertise and professionalism, and we really appreciate all the hard work that you do for our communities. So on this subject, which is not, this is obviously heavy lifting, and it's something that not only is heavy lifting based on subject matter and content, but as you noted at the beginning, there's some friction or some challenges with respect to different makeups of communities. We didn't even get in the weeds yet anyway about some of the fiscal pressures and challenges that some of those respective communities face that often makes some of these areas and issues even more of a challenge than perhaps in other communities. So there's so many different components to this topic, and so just right out of the bat, we wanted to thank you so much for taking this on, and the fact that you would put your name on this proposed legislation really is a matter and a source of pride for us, so we really appreciate it. And just to be more specific, we deal with this issue, maybe not specifically on an applicant's proposal for a 40B, but even indirectly through, like you say, work in the development of a housing partnership plan with the Board of Selectmen, but also these issues, their impact even indirectly. And one of the things, for example, that I'll share before I open it up to our board members is we've had a lot of discussion before we completed drafting of the Center Business District bylaws, for example, that our town meeting passed a couple years ago, but on what is affordable housing, what is the definition, do people even understand what that is Section 8 included, what species of sort of public or quasi-public housing is or is not included, and is it a capital A, meaning like affordable housing under 40B statute, for example, that maybe runs with the land, or are we talking about, the little a, meaning housing that is simply just more affordable?
Yeah.
And in many instances, maybe it's smaller housing, but it's perfect for empty nesters or those starting out. And whether or not, what exactly should we be focusing on based on state mandates? Do we have to only focus on the capital A, forgive the vernacular, but meaning, what's statutory? What about all those other, smaller units, smaller houses that it really have provided the fabric and the backbone of so many towns and communities in this great state, including Winchester. So we look at it as a board in so many different dimensions, and that's another reason why we are so grateful that you are proposing this legislation, because we truly believe that through through the statewide study that you've presented, will really capture some of the issues and challenges that have been going on, and certainly it's overdue, 50 years. So, but nevertheless, because of the kind of contentiousness of some of these issues, that perhaps reflects why we haven't gotten to this point yet. So I'll now kind of open it up. Maybe I'll start with Maureen, and I'm sorry.
Just if I may, one, I want to thank you for the laudatory comments. I'll be back next week if this is what I
Great.
But also, just to highlight one of the points you raised, Madam Chair, which is this affordable housing problem is a different problem in every community. And how each community treats it is different. And so the wide swath of just painting everything with a broad stroke that 40B does is problematic for different reasons in different communities. And so I appreciate that comment, which is why I think this commission is what I've been really driving towards, is to get that input from around the Commonwealth, to say, hey, you know, down in the Cape, we've got trailer parks. They're not being counted, they're affordable, but they're not being counted in our stock. You know, what is affordable? In Winchester, it's something entirely different than it is up in Lowell. And so to really capture and figure out where we are 50 years later. I know that the law has been put to good use, frankly, in developing affordable housing. The stocks have increased considerably as a result of this law. But it's also, I think, well past time to really take a hard look at this and say, is the broad stroke really the best way we can attack this now? You know, our understanding of society, our understanding of how towns and municipalities function and how they work best has changed over 50 years. And nothing has really been updated in our approach to affordable housing in that, at least in the codifying.
Right, and as you point out, broad strokes, I guess another term might be the cookie cutter approach. You know, does the cookie cutter approach really, is it, you know, bringing out the best in all of the opportunities that may exist in different communities and different creative solutions that might, you know, really attack the issue that may exist, and yet do it in a way that is feasible and efficient. So, I mean, not only do we think this is a fantastic idea that you're proposing here with the study, but I mean, honestly, given our almost like each meeting sort of discussing either directly or indirectly many of these issues, I'm sure many on this board would kind of agree that this is just an ongoing and evolutionary challenge and goal, and for the betterment of society. But how does it actually get done, and in what different communities can there be kind of variations as opposed to the cookie cutter approach? So in any event, so Maureen, did you have some specific comments? And then we'll go sort of like clockwise, and yeah.
And by the way, before I forget, these are not my comments, but I was not aware of 658, and at some point before you leave, I think this board should be discussing how we feel. My guess is that I think both of these House bills sound really positive, and I'm guessing, and I'm not, we're not there yet, but I'm guessing we all do. And if there's some way we can send some formal support from Winchester back to your colleagues, I'd like them to know we think that this is a good start to opening a conversation that's long overdue.
Well, that'd be great. And actually, on that point, I spoke with a resident earlier tonight about, you know, what can we do to really move this ball in the legislature. One of the challenges is that my guess is that all of the 40B legislation can be heard on one day in one hearing from the Housing Committee, and so they haven't noticed yet, so I don't know what day that is. I will certainly communicate that to this district, and a letter of support would be more than welcome if the planning board was so inclined.
Okay, great.
So,
great.
Brian, I asked you to bring some things, so I'm wondering if you can start with bringing up let's just start with our basic Winchester zoning map, if you don't mind. So.
Already much fancier than the State House, isn't it?
Okay. Around. So there are already a few things in place that, as you said, we've been negligent. I actually want to differ. We have not funded a planner. And without a planner, I've been on this board I was elected in 2000, it's like 18 years almost now, 17 years I'm in. I can tell you, at least for 17 years, this has not been a hostile board toward this concept. It's just the lack of staff. And once we got staff, and this is our second, and we love you, our second planner full-time, that we finally have been able to move forward in that direction. So without staff, you will find that most communities, and I did do a lot of homework this afternoon looking at the list of communities and the percentages of where they are on the affordable housing, a big A, as defined by the state. And when there's staff, you can do a lot more. Concord, a beautiful, very upscale town, because that's the goal. So, but they've had a long history of funding staff. So,
but that's a community decision as well to fund that staff.
I was here. We wanted it.
Right.
We were begging and pleading, and we weren't getting it. So, I wouldn't say the community was even in the conversation. There was a very small, like whether our budget could quote unquote take absorb the cost and basically reallocate funds because there's never enough funds. So
Right.
this was quite a long haul to get to where we are right now. But with that in mind, with the planning staff, starting with Betsy Ware and now with Brian Kelly, we've been able to do this rezoning. So you can see a town that not only, when I came on board, we rezoned GBD2, GBD3. This is North Main Street, which you see in these orangey colors. So those were to provide for allowing the mixed use, meaning housing and so on. But I don't want to belabor this, but the point is, we already have a high percentage of our land that's open to two-family housing and multi-family housing. So I don't really think that we have to be flogged, not you, but I'm saying in general, for being such a, I guess you'd say, opposed to the kind of range of housing and the kind of range of housing types, but also expensive versus inexpensive. We've got quite a range, except that it's all coming up, as you were saying. So it's been a challenge in that way. But in terms of the zoning, so when I came on in 2000, the planning board that season, in fact, just did rezone for GBD2, GBD3. And after that, aside from that, we've already got this two-family housing, and then very recently, as you know, we rezoned for the Center Business District to allow for multi-use in this greater development. So this is a town that's, despite my frustration, which is extensive, and you're hearing it about not funding a planner, when we finally did get that fund, which is frankly a small piece of a town budget, but when we finally got it with a supportive manager, we have been able to make some headway. So we are behind. We're just behind in terms of like compare us to Concord, but I think we've got some very positive things in place, and we get no credit for all that we do have that's right there in our zoning.
Well, let me just take issue with that piece, because I think what I discussed was the historical resistance for whatever reasons in Winchester, but you've got Mass Housing now paying attention and giving credit for, the meetings we've had here, for these types of developments. You're now priming corridors that make sense in a very logical way, again, with the aid of a planner,
Right.
to say this is where we believe we can or should increase density, or is possible to increase density, with more affordable units,
Right.
with mixed use
Right.
development. And so I think I couldn't agree more that you're going the right way, and you've made huge strides in the last,
Right.
again, 6 years or so, or longer there, but certainly in the last 6 years.
Actually, a lot longer.
Right.
And the whole intention of the rezoning going back almost 20 years now.
But I think what you're getting is, you are getting some credit from Mass Housing for what's going on here. And they want us, obviously,
Yeah.
you need to continue down the path, but you're getting a much warmer audience and much more receptive audience.
Well, I think dialogue. Let me just ask for a couple more slides and then I'll stop it. Brian, I had asked if you could bring up the tear down map. So at my request, and you can see this, and I do take credit for it, you see I came on in 2000, that's when we started tracking, that's me. So we started tracking the tear downs in this community. These aren't big houses, these are smaller houses, and these are entry level, and it's not abating. So our total right now up through 16, that's 244 houses. That's a lot, I've seen this. And that's not counting the ones that get blown up if they've not actually needed a demolition permit. That's a lot of housing, and those are for real families. That's not the, and what I find kind of sad about the the inclusionary housing is what we're doing is we're losing the good family houses, but at the other end, we end up with these sort of random units in these really strange places for really raising a family, often totally inappropriate. So we have one example that's my favorite because it's so, I think, sad, right in the CBD, and we got this unit. There's one bedroom, and it's got a little tiny den with no closet in it. And a family's going to go in there. That's how my grandparents lived when they moved in Coney Island and during the Great Depression with relatives. It's really everybody's just hemmed in. So it's it'll be a fancy new building, but they got this poor family going to be crowded in there into this little dinky unit when we're losing 240 some real family houses. So these will not be cheap, but these will be the $500,000, $600,000 houses. And when they come down, they're going, and we are tracking, we need a lot more data, but we have it generally, we're going for about $1.4, $1.6 million. So that's a real huge loss for this community. So I want to go back to chapter 40B, if you could, and I don't know if you're prepared to bring up.
Can I just also say, if you need us to send that map,
I've actually got a copy. of it.
you have a copy, okay.
Brilliant, isn't it? Engineering gets credit. We had to throw bouquets at this table. Beth Rudolph actually was coming to the assistant engineer at the time, created it. So 40B, and the first thing I'd like is section 20. So this is definitions, and I guess the part that came out to me was the phrase consistent with local needs. It was a great idea. It's not working. This is, what's consistent for us is not construction. We're needing, and this whole section 20 through, through 23, is really about building. And when you look at section 21, if you want to go forward, Brian. Thank you, Brian, so much for this. It's quite simple. It's just any public agency, limited dividend or nonprofit, blah blah, to build lower. So this is all about building. We're built out. Anything that's happening here is either on a piece of land that's so substandard, like Forest Circle, that's really criminal, be blasting the thing to smithereens and imposing this on these neighbors, when it's just land that's not built on for a very good reason, drainage issues and blasting issues and so on. So in the meantime, the way we're addressing low and moderate income housing is, in this town, it's about rebuilding, it's about redevelopment, and it's not like open space. So if we go back to this thing historically in the late 60s, the west side of town of Winchester was truly open. But it's not anymore. And so it's a different world here, and I think I should stop there. But the tear downs to me are concerning. I think we've done some decent zoning and over almost 20 years. And I think the, last one, list of cities and towns by density. Were you able to find something?
Yeah, there's two. One's just density, just people per square mile.
Absolutely.
And then we have another one that has to do with development. It's also interesting. Hold on. So we're number 53 out of 351 at 3,300
Back to
people
back.
per square mile. This last category is in the nation, the density of cities nationwide.
I've never seen this before, but he just bought this one.
Somerville obviously is number 1 in Massachusetts. I believe it's number 38 nationally. The other that has to do with development was the losing ground statistics by Mass Audubon. So this is specifically for the town of Winchester, and shows total area of developed land and total area of natural land. This is not as indicative of what some of the issue is. It's this one. It's the percent of our land that's developed, not so much the total number. We're at 69%. We're ranked 30th. So out of 351, we're in the top 10% for percent land developed. So those are I think that was all I had with density.
So, two things. One, could you send me that density, the first one? That has the
Yeah.
52.
Yeah, Winchester, Stoneham, right next to each other, yeah.
My district.
Yeah,
Get both of them.
that's welcome, Mike.
But the other piece too is, and I don't know if you get this number, Brian, you get, the other trigger on 40B, as you may know, is 1.5% of all your developable land devoted to affordable housing.
Right.
Most communities can never reach that.
We did that calculation last year. It would have been not impossible, but
Yeah.
nearly to make that happen in terms of right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you may not have the numbers you're going to share, we can talk offline if you need to, but 69% is the total land developed,
Yes.
of developable land, developed, right?
Yeah. So you're not counting.
Fells and.
Yeah. You're not counting
Oh,
water. You're not
roads.
counting.
Right.
It's about. We're about. I thought we were more. I think we're only about 3% open water. Would be.
Yeah, we were talking about that today.
Yeah, it's only about 3%. I thought it was actually significantly higher, but it's not. but yeah, you wouldn't count conservation land.
Right.
And then water, and I actually don't even think Mass Housing is coming out with a whole book essentially on how to actually calculate this, because there's been so many legal cases and controversies about this, so they're coming out with it. But I don't really think you count roads. I mean, it's a very,
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
they
and I just
really know Stoneham, the other town I represent, is in litigation over this very issue now.
Yeah, no, they're not the only one.
1.5%, whether they've reached it or not. But one of the things that kind of jumped out at me here is if we do get this bond bill moving,
Yeah, that's good.
one of the dedicated streams of revenue are going to be to develop and redevelop
good.
housing authority properties.
Yeah.
And so expansion of housing authority properties haven't expanded in this state really since the 50s, since the post-war boom when a lot of government housing was converted into housing authorities. And so you haven't seen anything, and you see 3-year wait lists
Yes.
in Winchester for a spot in the housing authority. And so one of the goals, if we can get this bond bill through from my end, is to dedicate a huge portion of that stream to housing authority, to allow them to increase to get up to that 1.5%, frankly, to get more housing in your stock, in your town controlled stock in that end. But these are helpful numbers for sure.
Great.
They're not surprising.
well, I don't think most people in town know how developed, I mean, yeah, they know we're built out, but 30th in the state?
Yeah.
Probably not. Probably most people would not think that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at we're the oldest part of the country, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, to your point, we're built out.
Right. And also, so the challenges with meeting those, not to sound pejorative, but cookie cutter
Right.
targets are very different for Winchester than it would be for a community that didn't have that same kind of density and also available open land. So did you have any other comments or
Yeah,
questions?
Just add a
It's
comment
just
on this
a
before I leave?
Oh,
Do you mind?
Yeah, no.
Just related to what you're saying, if you also, right, there's 351 towns or cities in Massachusetts. If you look at our total area, we are 332. So we are also one of the smallest,
Sure.
but we are the ones that are about to get ambushed.
Right.
So, or if we don't get assistance in some way, and I'll go into my thoughts on that. But I just want to point out exactly how small we are and
But that's
how
how-
much they're looking for from us.
Right.
I did ask Brian to bring one more that I think you probably got, I call it the assessor's map, but it's the one with the footprints. Are you able to look at that?
Yeah.
I just like this, because then I want further, I just think these visuals help a lot.
Oh, no, they're great.
See what-
I happen to have it on the neighborhoods development map, so this is. I mean, at this scale, at this scale, it's not so helpful, but I don't know
Yeah, it's just like, well, now what? I mean, you can kind of see where would you actually put anything at any scale. I think that's enough, and you get.
Maureen, can you just give like a 10-second description of this for those who are present here today and also watching?
Well, of course, this is actually development patterns, but it just shows where the housing is and where the roads are in Winchester. And the only areas where you see there's even some wiggle room is, in fact, Winning Farm will be going out to the
this is.
over, way
Oh,
over
sorry,
in the
yeah.
corner, yeah, exactly. And it is like Forest Circle, it's the little tiny corners of the town that are basically the only land left for any sizable development. And otherwise, you're just driving up and down the streets of Winchester, and any normal person would say, well, this is a nice street, and that's it, it's done, it's baked. So that's why we end up with all these tear downs, because, and I do want to say this, the tear down targeting here, because of this is Sunday Boston Globe, it is a while ago, it was April 2017. But the developers really are coming from, as far as Worcester, they're really from all over coming into the community with looking for opportunities to take these small houses down. But just the map shows, I think, there's no room for new lots. They're just sometimes moving houses or tearing down a house. If it's an older house where there was a larger lot, they'll try to wedge in something else, but most typically, it's just a regular subdivision with uniform sized lots and uniform.
Yeah, although the tear down to me isn't an issue on the discussion of affordable housing so much as it is an issue of the vision of your town and where you want to go and a function of the economy right now, right? I mean, Winchester is one of the most desirable towns around. Developers are coming in and blanketing homes unsolicited.
Yes, they are.
with, "We'll buy your house." And so that's a.
Well, it's an issue with the little a stuff,
Yeah, that's
ultimately,
right.
That's right.
which we, I think collectively, we're hoping that you leave here with one of many points, but is that we think that's important.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's unclear whether or not that's a point that's shared by others on the state level.
Right, I mean, at least 200.
And whether or not that is part of this equation or can be. But, so do you want to contribute some comments?
Sure. I have a quick question about your co-sponsors. So this, you put this out in January of this year.
Which one?
I'm sorry, 657. And so I'm wondering, since then, have you had any more than it looks like there are about 10 or 12 people?
It should be about 12 or 13. No, there's a function of the legislature, which is a frustration to me personally, in that you've got 10 days to file a timely bill, which means it's guaranteed a hearing and guaranteed a public process to go forward without having to go through the Rules Committee and exceptions. And so you've got 10 days after that to co-sponsor a bill. So the vast majority of the 7,000 pieces of legislation that get filed every year are filed within those first 10 days of the session.
Okay.
They call it an anti-freshman rule, frankly. And so within those first 3 weeks, you're either signing back up to a lot of legislation that didn't get passed before, that you're already familiar with, or you're trying to digest a lot of new legislation that's coming at you. And as a result, you're getting a lot of folks that say, I just didn't see your bill. I'm not saying that happened with this one, but that's a function that you won't get more co-sponsors. You may get more support, but you won't get formal co-sponsorship beyond that 2-week window because of the rules of the legislature.
Okay. So the fact that there are so few doesn't say anything about the quality of the bill. It's
No, I hope not.
Civics law on here.
But I have sent in, letters of support and testified for bills that I'm not co-sponsored on because of that as well.
And have you had a positive response from representatives around this area?
I've had, if you see the list of co-sponsors, it's an interesting group. It's not any one political stripe. You're seeing a lot of individuals from communities that are being impacted adversely, in their minds anyway, by 40B. So you've got Democrats, Republicans on there. You've got a few from some urban areas, from Springfield, from Framingham.
Oh, really?
On there. But for the most part, you're seeing suburban and rural representatives putting your name on that in the first couple of weeks. I think what I've been hearing, and as I've been trying to speak with colleagues about moving these bills forward, I'm getting the same tension of, people from bigger cities saying, not my issue. I don't really want to deal with it. You guys have to deal with it on your own. And the challenge is getting it over that hurdle to get this on the table for discussion.
Okay, because
I don't know if that answered the...
it certainly does. One of my concerns is this is one of the 600, the 5,700 bills that doesn't make it through the 2-year session. And I'm wondering what it is that citizens can do to push this forward in those communities which are affected. I don't know that it's widely known that this bill exists, and that's something that I think would be very useful. At least.
There was a group that, and I take that point very well, because that's one of the frustrations that you have when you've got 5,000 to 7,000 pieces of legislation filed. It's finding oxygen for some of them. I'll give you a quick example. The EFSB legislation I filed in response to some of the Eversource issues going on here has gained great traction in communities like Lincoln and Everett and Medford, where this issue is impacting them, Holyoke or others where pipeline issues are impacting them. But outside that, people are saying, well, I don't know what that is. It's not a burner issue for me because it's not in their backyard right now. And so one of the challenges is to make sure that communities that can and will be impacted or are vulnerable, I think, are aware of this type of thing. And that's been one of the struggles, or challenges, I shouldn't say struggle, but challenge during the time in the session.
Okay.
But to your point, writing letters reaching out to the chairs of the housing committee, reaching out to Mass Housing directly to express a town or an individual opinion is always helpful, because again, I said this before, I read every piece of correspondence that comes into my office, whether it's an email, a phone call, or a letter. That comes to me directly. So,
Thank you for that.
It won't help you pass this bill, because you're,
well,
Yeah.
my communities won't,
Yeah.
right, because I'm already there,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
others certainly.
yeah. My concern, I have a number of concerns about affordable housing in this town, and I think of it more as a region-wide problem, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I live in Precinct 8, which is one of the older working-class sections of town. We have a minimum 6,500 square foot lots. We've been, on the tear-down map, we've been hit pretty hard. And I think of affordable housing as including more than just housing you can buy, but housing you can rent. And my concern with things like 40B that I've seen is most of these things end up being condos. And so, for instance, right across the street from me, you can rent something that came after a tear down for $4,200 a month, which is, an insane amount of money. So what I'm concerned about is not just the diversity of housing stock, but the ability for a community to support a diversity of income levels for the people who live there. And I'm really, there's the affordable A, with a capital A, and affordable with the lowercase a. And I'm really concerned that even with the affordable with the capital A, which is, I believe, 80% of the median income, we're still keeping an awful lot of people out.
I couldn't agree more.
And I think that in order for this part of Massachusetts to retain the people we need to go forward in the economy, we have to be open to allowing people to move around a lot more freely. And I think that Winchester's historical housing patterns have not permitted that. We're losing the people who we would like to keep. My neighbor moved out because his kids couldn't afford to live in this town, and so he's now moved out to someplace where he's close to his kids. So one of the other things that I note is that while we do have a number of, and this is a zoning issue, we do have a number of regions where we can put two houses. I think that in order to solve our housing problem, we're going to have to look a little harder as to where we can put in multifamily units. And I know this will not be popular in those parts of town which are single family, but if we want to keep out large developments, which we think overburden particular parts of town, then we have to think about where we're going to put in more units which are compatible with the neighborhoods, but perhaps not currently permitted to be zoned there. And that's a local issue, and that's a very tough political local issue, but I don't see how Winchester is going to meet its housing needs unless we do that.
Just on that point, can I ask you where, and again, if they're not there, there's no reason to really go into it, but where is, I know Winchester doesn't allow accessory dwelling units,
I believe that is correct.
Correct.
and is there a discussion on this board about?
Last year, we had a discussion. There was a group
proposal,
last year
yeah.
that came, and most of the board agreed kind of with the proposal, but it wasn't.
I don't know
fully
about
baked.
that.
It wasn't.
No,
fully
I think
baked.
that's unfair. If you don't mind me kind of stepping in, it was something that was kind of cookie cuttered out of a whole different, like, I think, a community outside of Massachusetts, and it wasn't clear that it had been refined even as far as its drafting, and it certainly encouraged a lot of discussion about that topic, and there's a variety of opinion and viewpoints. I think a lot of it gets also to some of the comments I want to make sure that Heather and I have a chance to give you some feedback on as well. But to answer your question directly, they kind of sort of came, gave a presentation, and then left. So I don't even know that there's some like actual form or proposal or that sort of thing. But to say that there's a variety of opinion on it, that would be an understatement.
No, I know that, and that's,
Yeah.
and again, it's a province of this board and of the local zoning, pieces going forward. I was just curious as to whether this was being discussed on this.
It was that night.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. No, it absolutely is a rail in certain respects.
Yeah, I don't think there's an active discussion. But, my other concern about 40B is that when a 40B development comes in, there's a bit of magic bookkeeping that goes on. And the part that dismays me is that you can count many more affordable units in a complex than there actually are. And I don't think I think that's trying to solve the problem. It's trying to solve
You're referring to 25%.
yeah, you get to
Why
count
make
them
it-
all.
Why
if
not
you
make
have
it
them there.
2.5% and just have it be, you need to have 2.5%?
I think that if you're going to be honest about what's affordable in a community, you can't fudge the numbers. And I know that it looks better on paper if you can count all the units, but I think that's not fair to the people in the town, and it's not fair to the challenge of getting more affordable housing. I mean, it's dishonest, in my opinion. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I'll keep this really short, is that one of the things you mentioned about the governor's housing bond bill is the concept of expanding the list of properties that housing authorities have. It's never going to happen in Winchester, just because the land prices are too expensive. So I mean, if you want to buy a house, you're going to have to put down, even in my neighborhood, you're going to have to put down $600,000 for a piece of land, and then you have to build a house or you have to redevelop. So if you hand the housing authority $1 million, they'll get maybe 1.5 units out of it. So I don't know, I mean, it's a wonderful idea, and I think in some communities it's a great idea. I don't know how applicable it is to Winchester. And I forgot, I had one more point, and that is one thing I would love to see is some sort of a incentive for developers to redevelop existing stock. And that gets back to what Maureen was saying. It's so much easier, as I'll bring up my neighbor's house, for someone to come in, take down a somewhat modest 18-something house for one family, tear it down and build in a 3,000-foot thing and sell it for $1.3 million. So it's a lot nicer if someone could come in and get some sort of support, the developer, so they can make a decent profit but maintain the affordability of the resulting property. And some sort of private-public partnership, and I don't know, I'm a little leery of those because I don't know how well they are policed. I've, seen enough shows on how large corporations would build affordable housing. I think there was a big case in Florida where they were, essentially bilking the state out of money. And so I don't know that there are enough resources at the state level in order to ensure that public monies are used efficiently. And so that's another concern.
Okay, so can
I'll
I?
respond to that.
Yeah,
after. I
okay.
wanna allow-
Yeah,
and then I'm-
yeah.
that, and then I'll respond to that. after.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to note that I have done a terrible job in trying to corral the amount of time so far, but if you're willing, we'd love for you to stay a couple minutes longer so that Heather and I can make sure that you hear our comments as well, because we've already kind of elapsed a lot of time, so.
We also baked in another 15 for that.
Okay, good. So go ahead, Heather. Okay, thank you so much.
So overall, I'm going to start on the big, broad look at 40B and then come down to more of a local level. First of all, my colleagues on the planning board keep referring to it as affordable housing with a capital A. It's actually not. It's affordable housing that's subsidized by the local and state, by federal and state government. And with that in mind, when it's subsidized, it's not only just subsidized by them, it's also being subsidized by this town for town taxes. And that is, so when you look at how it's written and how it's developing, then what happens is our taxes are raised to accommodate for that, and then those who are not in the subsidized housing is then being hit hard, and it's hurting the working class across the state. There's no doubt about it, because they're just shy of it, of hitting that mark, but then yet they are paying more taxes for it. An example, I personally have lived in a complex. I owned a condo in a 40B unit, and there is also discrimination going on because you know exactly who is in the subsidized units in that complex. You know because, one, their finishes are not equal to everyone else's finishes, so you know that those 4 units out of the 20 that are not built with the granite and the hardwood floors, you know that they are subsidized. So everyone knows, and the whole point is to make it not, to them not feel that they're any less or any, it's to make them feel part of the community. And when you drive around the state, you can easily pinpoint a lot of the projects that have been funded through this law. So, and the proposals, when you look at them in Winchester, they stand out like a sore thumb. The 40B projects that are being proposed, they're going into communities where, in parts of our community where the density is a certain way, and they are changing the density, not just kind of mildly changing it, but drastically changing it. So when I go back and I look at this law and I look, okay, it was written in 1969, what was going on? It was at the cusp of what was actually called the Poor People's Campaign, when $300 billion was put in as a result, and Martin Luther King was behind the campaign, which was to support people of poverty and racism. And and back then, it was a great solution for the knowledge, but the knowledge has changed dramatically. And the understanding of discrimination has changed dramatically. And this falls so short of recognizing the differences between just creating housing for people so they are supported and hurting others who just fall short of it. And it hurts others too farther when things go wrong or whatever. But so that's my experience with it. The other thing is when something happens in those condo communities, a lot of times they are allowed by law to allow the people who are whose units were purchased under this law, that their condo fees are reduced at a different percentage than everyone else's. So everyone else, if the roof goes, are paying above market premiums for the repair of the roof to cover those other people in their complex, which creates huge hostility. There's no one managing the process after the product is produced. The money is also only going for the construction. I know, because I'm in construction litigation and forensics, that a lot of the construction of these units are subpar. And then the people who are living in these communities are getting hit hard to repair them, to keep them up and keep water out of their houses. And there's no one really, there's no go-to to go and get support for that at the state. So now they're getting these houses that are not up to par, that are leaking. A lot of them don't have the money to sustain those and to do those repairs, and there's no one there to help them.
The condo development?
Yeah, the condos, because the apartments are usually managed by the apartment, but the condos, communities. So it really just needs to be relooked at with the amount of information and knowledge we have today about what exactly is racism and poverty, and really reanalyze it so that we are being productive. And so then on a local, you had commented about the staff, Maureen. So pretty much you said, well, you didn't make it a priority. Well, in town, we don't have much commercial, and a lot of our taxes go to our schools. So we're set to a certain percentage increase without going to an override, and that is going to our schools. So we have to make a choice, schools or 40B. What do we do? And in this town, schools usually have always won, at least as long as I've been here. So, and then, as he pointed out, the 10%, we have affordable housing in this town, actually, that meets that median, but that's not being counted towards this document, because it's not subsidized. So there are people who have units. Parkview is a good example of a complex in town that is not subsidized by the state, but those units do not count, and those are units that the working class can afford. There's also rentals. There are a tremendous amount of rentals actually in this town that meet that quota but are not being counted. So that goes back to those comments. When we talked about the tear downs, it was like 240. We had 199 units according to this law that are quoted as lower moderate income housing. So we actually have had more tear downs than affordable lower moderate income subsidized housing. So I know I have spoken to you, and I'll say this, because I've spoken to you on the side about it, is that in the state, there's a lot of talk about housing. How can we produce more housing? How can we, and there's so much underutilized properties throughout the state. And, you know, the conversation you and I had came out of the energy issues that are going on at the state level, and creating more effort to utilize existing housing stock and build on what we currently have that's underutilized and not used or abandoned or just not used as efficiently as possible, actually would push this so much further to the needs of the state. And so I would like to, you know, part of this is incentivizing, instead of just the developer, is incentivizing those who restore, renovate, restoration. Doesn't have to be historical, but just incentivizing. And then you're not just incentivizing huge development companies, because that money is not trickling down. The builders of Greater Boston, the national chapter, have said that that money is not trickling down to the subs. And if you are incentivize more restoration, renovation, you will get more money being brought into the working class of the communities. So I'd like you to look into, just have that kind of in the back of your head. The majority are apartments or condos. They are not single families. That's where, you know, you asked about the accessory apartments, and I'm actually going to just nail it on the head why we don't talk about it. Because we know how much taxes we get out of those units does not equate to covering at least one kid in our schools. So we stay away from it because we cannot get enough taxes to make it feasible financially for our town to pay for those accessory apartments. You could go and say, well, you could do it for a family member, and you could try to make it so it is only for a certain age group, but that is not the appropriate way to do it. So that's why I personally, no, we can't do it. We can't financially afford to open up accessory apartments on lots when we can't afford to pay for those children's education appropriately. And the other, you know, is we are a unique, because we are a very small community in the state, and we don't have places to put it. And so what's going to end up happening, and there has been a lot of discussion, is it's being targeted into certain neighborhoods, and it's just not an acceptable way in today's date to do that. To create the housing production plan, when we're looking at where can we put it, what can we do, where can we rezone? It hits specific neighborhoods, and it always targets the same neighborhoods, because it's just the way the development pattern moved, and it predates, the development pattern predates this law, but it's what's going on. And so, yeah, we're gonna go with the housing production plan and look at it, and the planning board alongside the select board is going to try to be as creative as possible to not have it target. But my neighborhood is going to be the most affected by creating that housing production plan and continuing to follow this. And it's one neighborhood, it's not town-wide, because we just do not have the land without uprooting huge portions.
Yeah, no, there's a huge economic justice problem with the way a lot of these developments are targeted. And you're looking at, you know, precinct 8, precinct 1,
Yeah.
we talked about earlier. That's where it's being targeted. They're traditional working class communities, they're industrial.
I mean, we have one pending, I'm not disagreeing, but we do have one pending in a different precinct, but in any event.
That's in one, correct? You mentioned.
No, I meant Cambridge Street.
Oh, Cambridge Street, oh.
Yeah. Are you done?
I think.
We could talk to you about this all night, and we have so much pent up, but if you had another couple minutes, that's fine, Heather, and then I'll jump in, and then Representative Day has kindly agreed to stay a few minutes longer.
The one portion I did is that local needs is not defined.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take into account true local needs that are the right local needs. Just,
Consistent with local
yeah,
needs, exactly.
and it's kind of vague, but it's the Board of Appeals is the one who reviews it and takes all the decisions and works through it. They get most of their training, actually, from our housing, but they're appointed, it's 3 members, and they bring it all together, and it's on 3 people of this community's shoulders to carry this law. And that, you know, they take feedback, but it's the vote of 3 people. So 2 people in this town can control the feedback that goes back to it. And that is concerning also.
I definitely agree with so many of the comments that have been beautifully articulated by our fellow board members, and you'll be happy to know, Representative Day, that we're missing one member, so otherwise we would ask you to stay even longer, but I'll try, I'll try not to be repetitive, and, but I guess,
If you agree.
okay, well, as you can tell, we have a lot of viewpoints here, and it's a reflection of literally every meeting, as I noted before, having some direct or indirect experience with this topic in general. And so I was going to suggest, before I get to some of my kind of more granular comments, that if we could be of assistance to you and of even coming up with topics, we're assuming that this will get passed, this particular bill number 657, for example, that we could maybe be of assistance to you in a topic list for you to review for those various community meetings, the 14 that you indicated previously. So, because there are a lot of topics that maybe superficially wouldn't be considered, and many of them have been aired tonight, but we would love to have any role that we possibly can in helping just provide data that we're seeing on the grounds. You can see some of this we already have kind of literally mapped out, but others that we have conceptualized based on our own experience. But I just wanted to, one thing that'll be a little bit duplicative of what Heather was saying, but it just really, I know you're an attorney and I'm an attorney, and I think procedure is so important. But one of the things that always frustrates me with any inclusionary housing discussion is definitions. And not only my own personal ignorance with what the vernacular is in this kind of field, but also the kind of evolving notions of what the definitions are. For example, if you talked with many people, including perhaps in the Capitol, if you started talking about inclusionary housing or affordable housing, many might think that that includes some of the examples that Heather was given like Section 8 or even like fully funded housing. But it seems like the definition, like, do the goalposts change? You know, will this ever be satisfiable? Will the percentage then just come down to 70%, for example, of median income? Is this something that can never really be attained? And I mean that kind of rhetorically, but also in the sense that if there's any progress that can be made, kind of reflecting definitions that are workable, that make sense, but, you know, certainly can continue to evolve, but that also kind of reflect some of the actual experiences. The other point that, that I can't help but confess, that is always so great in my mind in any kind of discussion on this topic, is demographics. So Massachusetts' population is certainly growing, but it's not growing like it is in some other areas of the country. And not to say that I don't want it to, but this discussion of inclusionary housing, affordable housing, it seems to always assume, and forgive me for being kind of blunt, but just in the interest of time, that there's this huge wave of people who just can't wait to get housing, and that, you know, and that we have, like, as if we have like 10% population growth or something. And it just seems like, does anybody ever say, hey, this is great as a goal, but does it reflect actual like demographics, actual like population increases? You know, is that factored in when you're asking a community that is so built out like Winchester to all of a sudden add hundreds of new units? I mean, would they even be filled? Would they be filled if they were sort of low enough? And then is that even a challenge that Winchester has to almost like create its own demand? And I kind of ask this rhetorically and not in any way accusatorily, but that these topics ideally would be discussed also with any kind of like a look at this at 40B, and whether or not realistic viewpoints of demographics are being considered, as opposed to, hey, let's just force Winchester to add 700 units or something. I mean, and I don't mean that in any pejorative way, but I mean, I guess my point simply being, what's realistic, what makes sense for a community to have under all of the kind of challenges that it may have. And then the fiscal considerations, I thought that Heather articulated extremely well Winchester obviously has, for better or worse, a lot of challenges in that area because we don't have the same commercial base, tax base that many other communities have. We're not happy about that. That's just a reality. That's not going to change tomorrow. So what that means is that, any sort of change in, or impact in the budget typically means property taxes go up. So it's, as Heather was articulating, to be naive or think that that's not a factor in a community is just not realistic, and it also impacts, dare I say, as Heather was commenting on, those who are struggling financially who live in this community. Those who are struggling, then all of a sudden they have more of a burden. So what are we doing? What is this that we're doing? Are we doing this so that people at some levels can say, hey, isn't that cool? We now have this number of units in a community that may or may not need them, that then as a result may or may not have like some very significant fiscal burdens and challenges as a direct result of it, not to mention including impact on schools and public services. And I'm not negative to this, I'm simply saying, hey, shouldn't we look at all these things? And in many discussions, and that I think Winchester has so courageously, specifically the Board of Selectmen, the Housing Partnership Board, so courageously really tried to give this topic such, the highest degree of professionalism that we're all volunteers can do. But nevertheless, I guess one of my other kind of concerns just goes to the fact that it almost seems, and forgive me for being blunt, but just in the interest of time, that sometimes the goals of inclusionary housing end up steering a ship, and the ship is full of hundreds of issues. And so instead of actually like dealing with all those issues in sort of an incremental way that would be kind of like your best planning, instead, because of different pressures, including on the state level, it seems like then we have to move in this area of like, oh, and then we have to think about parking, even though we kind of were thinking that, oh, maybe we should sort of discourage some, I'm just saying that sometimes this issue becomes paramount over others, and I just kind of wonder, I'm not suggesting that it's not super important whatsoever, so please no one misunderstand me, but many issues are important. And it's just important, and I think it's critical as good kind of having the public trust to give fair weight and analysis to multiple issues at the same time. And so our master plan, which we're going to be launching our redevelopment, which you probably know, and we're so grateful for town meeting support, and they're passing funding for us to do that. That's a perfect example of where in that laboratory we're tasked, as you know from the state statute, with comprehensively examining all these things all at once and not having one necessarily kind of drive decisions that may or may not be in the town's best interest. So I only kind of just throw that out as well. I would also note that location is sort of a fascinating issue, and I won't my point about location is sort of just in addition to what has already been noted, but the whole concept of smart growth and having affordable housing kind of near public transportation, it's another one of those points that sounds great. Many people want to be near public transportation anyway, whether or not you would be interested in inclusionary housing or not. But I guess I'm just sort of curious in our town center, especially with our fiscal challenges in this town, where we have such a disproportionate amount of revenue coming from residential property taxes, whether or not just how we look at those issues with affordable housing, and can the town afford certain analyses? Like if it means that then we have to build a new parking facility or something somewhere else. There's just, everything's a ripple effect because we're built out. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's like this domino effect. So we all at this table think this issue of inclusionary housing, affordable housing is extremely important. We're simply, every meeting dealing with the direct or indirect impacts of all of these issues in a vibrant community that is trying to get the best quality of life for their children and their families and the businesses. So just like Stoneham, Stoneham's, planning board and board of selectmen, we're on the front lines of this, but I guess we just are so happy that you're doing this. We want to do anything that we can that would help, this bill to pass so that this kind of study would definitely be launched. Would be so happy to help provide topics. We're extremely humble and grateful for everything that the folks on the state level, state planning, state housing are doing. We respect everything that they're doing. We're simply on the front lines trying to figure out, what happens with all of this? And, is it a good thing when, say, like a small house will be torn down and then a duplex put in? Well, you can check some boxes, but on the other hand, if those new duplexes now each cost $1.5 million, well, how was that affordable? You know what I mean? So, with the little a. But nevertheless, this housing stock that Maureen has so beautifully articulated with that map that's gone now in Winchester, yeah, I mean, wasn't that worth saving? Or why isn't that as important as building some structure that's going to bring in 400 new, that same 244 new units, And so anyway, I'll be quiet now, but I hope we've been helpful to you with some topics and
Build your case.
Yeah, and so we're just so appreciative that you're here.
No, thank you. And I'm absolutely thrilled with the feedback, number one, and the thoughts. Welcome them endlessly in this area. I wasn't a housing attorney.
Neither was I.
So this has been, I've been down the fire hose in the 3 years that I've been in so far. But it is a complex issue. You talk about capital A and small a, affordable housing. There are myriad issues that come at you when you're talking about what we're doing in this area. And, you're looking at tear downs. You're looking at, when I was talking with a resident earlier about the impact on transportation and how that's too often ignored in the clogging of our roads and the decrease in safety as a result of that. And that's not anywhere in 40B. And so one of the goals of both of my pieces of legislation, one is to open up 40B for a real comprehensive discussion throughout the Commonwealth about what different communities are facing, and to really get our arms around how complex this issue really is. But the other one is to recognize that we are having communities that don't have a good stock of affordable housing. They don't have diversity of housing in our stock. And to Gab's point, we've got there's diversity of movement that is also important. That's not factored in anywhere. At this point, you've got units in this town that probably should be counted in the stock that aren't counted in the stock. Then you get into issues of rent control. Are we talking about rent control here? And we're saying that unit is going to remain affordable? And so it's an incredibly complex area, which is why I think you've seen some hesitance from individuals in the State House to say, we're not going to touch that. We did it back in the
But it's
70s.
interesting, because you're not actually advocating touching it. All you're saying is, let's look at it, let's study it. So, that's the response to those legislatures,
Yep,
right?
that's a logical response.
The other
Right.
one that nobody's mentioned, so I want to just jump back.
Let me just
Oh, go ahead.
get through one last piece, and then I can turn it back over. One piece that I was remiss in mentioning earlier is our 40R program. And Jackie, I think you had mentioned a little bit about
Smart growth, yeah.
why our downtown, why are we looking there? It's going to have a ripple effect on parking somewhere else. Part of the goal and part of the studies we've seen over the years as to why downtown affordable housing is more attractive and better is that it cuts down on the need for automobiles. It cuts down on the need for individuals to come into town transportation-wise that need to, use certain amenities here. That's one of the pieces. But 40R really is not new anymore, but really focusing back on your point of redeveloping
Right.
our towns.
It's good.
Right, Reading had done a great program, a great 40R project in their downtown. If you remember the old King's Soup Market over there, that entire area has been changed, and they've built in, to your point, they've built in incentives for I'm not sure it was you that said public-private partnerships, but incentives for developers to come in and work cooperatively to bring in a blend of housing, to bring in affordable units in there. And the state is putting money into that to encourage that, allowing towns to offer TIFs, allowing towns to be able to match certain incentives there as well. So 40R is a huge program that I think is the goal, right? 40B, everyone focuses on, it's the stick from the state. And it's an old stick, but it's a very big one. 40R to me is the carrot. And that's where I want to focus, and that's where I want.
In our center business district, new bylaws, as you know, arguably has a lot of 40R in
It's
it.
primed perfectly, I think, for 40R. which would help jumpstart
Yeah.
not only, I think, the downtown, again, in furthering what we're doing down there, but also to allow the town to get control back over where they're developing and where these units are gonna be coming in. And that, close with this, just to circle back to my final piece, it's an incremental approach. This is a huge problem, a complex problem. What I hope the 658 will do is allow towns to take some credit back, some control back, by saying, you know what, we are gonna be focused on affordable housing, we are gonna march towards our goal, but we're gonna do it in a way that makes sense for us.
Right.
And we're gonna do it in a measured way, and the state's gonna give us credit for doing so. As long as we continue marching that way, we'll get credit and be able to control our own destiny. And so that's the thought process behind
Yeah.
that bill, which is extending that safe harbor provision.
With,
Just wanted to do one real quick, because nobody's mentioned it. I guess I'm not the one with the big E, the environmentalist, but I've always been one with a little e. I suppose the way women talk about feminism, I guess I've always been one, but I don't know if I want to carry the big F here. But the environmental issue, it's becoming more and more in the forefront, certainly around the world, and to the extent that I think we deal with housing, it goes back to this. This is just a debacle, and I feel so passionately
Yeah.
about it. We've really got, not just in this town, all these things are going to landfill. I don't like that. And then it's not even going to landfill in Winchester, which I do like, but it's getting trucked somewhere, and it's just getting disposed of. It's disgusting. And then beyond that, we've got capacity in many of these communities with old buildings that have perfectly good, solid structure, and they can be redeveloped, and we really need to re-incentivize this kind of work that uses existing buildings to put housing units in them. Sorry, Winchester has really lost those types of buildings, but we've had a few over time, but we're not in that best position. But I'm sorry, we've got to look at this statewide, we've got to look at it nationally and say, where do we have capacity? And it exists in a lot of
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
well, that goes back to why I was speaking to him about the energy, because
Yeah.
the mandates coming down, that the targets we have to hit as a state, and, replacing all these, they're trying to do all the mass save things to try to make it, or new construction with all the green building, but why I was talking is specifically about that, is because we can actually pick and hit those mandates using current construction and upgrading the windows and upgrading the HVAC and the insulation alone, and that is less use of energy to meet the standards than demolishing, and the amount of energy it takes to build those new construction
Exactly.
houses. You're not getting the trade-off, but we're still meeting the mandates with the, so that's why, that's
Yeah.
why I brought it up.
Yeah. And I guess just in closing, I would encourage you and welcome the assistance that you can offer, support
Yeah, we're here.
of not only these initiatives, but the new thoughts, new ideas. I mean, as you said, you're on the front lines of this, and to bring that voice, enable me to bring that voice up to Beacon Hill is invaluable, frankly.
Great.
Good morning, we'll be there to
I just
testify.
have a question, I'm curious, when are they going to be?
That's the great question. We haven't had them noticed yet.
Oh, because I know I should report, it's gonna be December 31st, that's a pretty tight deadline.
That would have to be adjusted, obviously, if we don't have the hearing and pass the bill in time.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna think, gee, how are we gonna be notified?
You're talking the commission?
Yeah,
Bill?
this, the
Yeah.
page 57,
Yeah.
right. So that was my.
So they haven't been noticed yet by the housing committee, and that's why I said, as soon as that does, I'll push them out to both towns and the residents.
Well, this is a study, but where does it go after you've done all this and had all the hearings, so what, in terms of what's?
Yep, and that's why I said, it was similar to the Foundation Budget Review Commission, which was set up, right? So that's, again, we are talking about Chapter 7 funding. That establishes what the problems are in a rational way from the entire state, not just from certain advocacy groups or from certain districts, and requires the legislature then to pick it back up. So the Foundation Budget Review Commission came back with their findings last year. A number of us have now put forward legislation to enact those recommendations, and that's what we're working through right now. So it'd be the same concept here, with the 40B piece.
We're actually just, do you have something really quick, because we're trying to get back to our agenda.
I'd like to point out something that all of you have hinted at, but, this meeting was to talk about the amendment to Chapter 40B, which sounds nice, that we're finally going to do something about the burden that 40B places upon our community and other communities across the Commonwealth. But the reality is, as several of you members of the board, the planning board pointed out, in reality, this is not going to do anything to alleviate the burden that 40B places on suburban communities, because of the fact that, well, even if we adopt a housing production plan that meets the state's requirements, it's going to require us to shoehorn in, because Winchester is all developed already, we're going to have to shoehorn in additional units, which would require additional burdens on the town, as Heather pointed out. Our school obligations, the cost of educating students goes up, and we can't collect enough revenue on residential development. So the reality is that this will not solve the problem at all. It offer, in exchange for getting a very short-term safe harbor provision of 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to put in additional development, which will increase the cost to our taxpayers, because we're not going to be able to collect enough revenue to bear the burden. And it does nothing to, for example, as was also pointed out, we have a lot of affordable units in this town, but they're not considered.
Right, under the definitions, yeah.
Because they're not
I think you basically summarized a lot of our comments, Tony, so I appreciate that. And I don't think Representative Day is suggesting that this is an overnight fix, if you will. But I always find that, and not to sound too theoretical, but anytime you're studying something, there's the hope that there would be change. But I mean, I think probably no one in this room would disagree with your basic point, Tony, that this isn't going to change overnight. I think that's obvious.
Well, it's not going to change anything at all. I mean, we're hoping that for an amendment that's going to make alleviate the burden, but it's not going to alleviate the burden. You're going to have a much more fundamental change if we're going to make any progress towards alleviating that burden.
Representative Day, do you mind responding to Mr.
No, I
Conti,
think,
please?
look, the two pieces that I've offered, one is, again, an incremental breathing room provision that'll allow the towns to say, we are going to take responsibility for our affordable housing requirements and what we need to do, which we haven't done in the past, and we're going to take control back over that process, and we're going to do so in a rational way. And the other is to say, we really need to look at 40B as a whole and see what changes do need to be made, and whether towns are being disproportionately impacted compared to other towns, and if so, what needs to change. We've heard, I can tell you, the drumbeat I hear considerably and consistently throughout is that the local needs piece is no longer functioning properly.
Right.
It's been, I don't want to say perverted, but it's been not applied in the way that probably it was intended to be applied. So that's one of the pieces I would expect they'd take a big piece of revision to, which would then address, some of the burdens of development and
I
density.
want to also throw out the term open space. I did read it this afternoon. I read both the sections 20 through 23. Actually, I read a fair amount of 40B as well, and then I also was reading CMR 56, so 760 CMR 56, and I see it again. There's a fair amount of discussion about open space, but this is actually, Forest Circle, that is open space. So I think to the extent that we do have these little patches of green remaining that we, or
Yeah, but again, I think we don't want to overlook
Wait.
redevelopment. We don't want to overlook, I did a lot of work on, before I became a rep on, and before I became a lawyer on brownfields.
Yeah, exactly.
Of giving credit to towns and encouraging towns to redevelop,
Good.
Which we have done recently
great.
in Winchester,
And I started
yeah.
doing that work back in 96.
Yeah.
So that's the type of focus is what I
Yes.
think we need to do, especially in the Northeast here,
Yes.
is focus on redevelopment and repurposing
Right,
of
and-
properties they've used their useful life already and need to be
Just to
reimagined.
address Tony's comments, would you say that the hope is that after this study, that then there'd be sort of like concrete data to then back up
Yeah, that's,
proposed
again,
specific
that's what I was
changes or
talking about with
something?
the equating it to the foundation budget review. Now we've got a set of data points, and we've got feedback from the different municipalities around the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
That then turns into a plan of action to take that full approach to revising 40B.
For example, to also support your reasons, not only what was going on when it was written, but also the building codes have changed so dramatically in the life and safety requirements that is actually causing huge issues to get these number of units in while maintaining safe slopes for ADA compliance. So all the laws with ADA compliance are not coming in since then. So just it gives you good standing to say, all these things have changed since this was written. These are things that we all feel equally important in
Yeah, I mean-
our law is that we have to analyze exactly what are we talking about.
Yeah, and again, to me, what will come out of the commission, hopefully, and what I intend for it to come out is we're gonna preserve the need and the aspirational goal to increase affordable housing in our communities. Because I think, that is essential, to have diversity in our communities of housing.
Yeah, it's just how to do
The way
it.
to do it. And that hasn't been, we've got a snapshot in time.
Right.
And it's 1969.
And also
we've been
recognizing
conservative
that there's some forces aside from government, such as, for example, smaller houses, that beautifully help in that direction.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in 69 had imagined some of the McMansions that have been bumping up around town and
The 50s
that,
World War II
so
housing
the-
was still functioning.
the military housing that had been flipped over is now being torn down and
Right,
that's,
right.
so it's a different.
Well, we'd
landscape.
certainly love it if you came back anytime, but more importantly, we'll contact your office maybe and
Yeah.
find out. And we stand ready to be, your resource at any time if you need data, maps, a list of some of the topics that were identified here tonight. And we're excited to work with you on this.
No, I appreciate it, and I certainly will take advantage of it. I already have. Brian's been great in providing data and maps and things of that sort that I've been training right over to Mass Housing.
And at any time, if you want us to contact the Stoneham Planning Department or Planning Board or respective boards, we'd be happy to, if it's easier for you to get sort of this coordinated a little, whatever's needed. But we feel badly taking up
No,
more of
not
your
at all.
time
No, I
than
happy
was
to come
scheduled,
happy to
and
talk,
thank you so
I appreciate the
much.
feedback because it's really helpful to me to then synergize this and bring it back up to the State House. So
Well, thank you
all.
for your courage and your initiative.
Compliment Representative Gray. I want to thank him tremendously. We had a wonderful conversation earlier, but he gets it. Developers and realtors shouldn't be the ones that are making the biggest profits.
Yeah.
Taking the stigma away from affordable housing for Heather, thank you so much for that comment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you all. Good
All
luck.
right, take care. Thank you, everybody who came tonight for this topic. We're going to go back to our other agenda, but you're welcome to stay.
Could I just make one point,
Sure.
which I think underscores the complexity of this? And everyone's leaving.
Right.
So I was thinking, what additional piece of short legislation could help us? And one of them was, well, we're not counting all of the units that we could count as affordable. But if we threw those in the mix and we said, we're going to count everything that's truly affordable, then everyone who has a 40B project would lose a bunch of units because they can't count the total number of units. They would only be able to count the actual affordable ones.
Well, I think the bigger point is that we actually don't, this whole state as a whole does not have a grip on affordable housing.
Oh, sure.
And where it stands, and what we actually have in our inventory, what's our actually needs, our projections, as Jackie referenced.
Yeah.
That's what the bigger issue is.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something might be useful to take immediate heat off. As Mr. Conti was saying, this isn't help, these bills will help in the future, hopefully, but
Yeah.
they don't help us now. But even something is saying, well, why don't we take into account the actual units that we think are really affordable? And then you'll have the communities which have lots of 40B developments, which is where they're getting their affordability, and all of a sudden, they're going to lose affordable
Yeah, they're gonna
units.
drop.
They're going to
They're-
drop. And so that simple correction is not going to happen. So, anyway, that was my own.
Yeah, I mean, usually if there's CMR and regs, that's something that doesn't have to be, passed in a legislative format, but that would require having a consensus at the state level of that respective agency. So that would be interesting to see whether or not there's some overlapping views.
We also
Yeah.
need some economics review of the whole,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
overall financial, economical
I was really
review.
glad to hear you talking about what is, I just clipped this out from the Globe just a couple weeks ago. Connecticut's actually lost population.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a lot of, my parents lived in Connecticut for 10 years. Connecticut's a nice place. It's just like, there's certain little, in the Northeast, I can't speak for the whole country, but places, and Boston's lucky, I guess, that we have this demand. It's good for those of us who own property, but long-term, we really should be distributing our population where there's.
Or have it at least reflect the actual population growth percentage, as opposed to just adding in hundreds of,
But, there are two people who work for my partner, Sherry, who left the state because they wanted to start families and they couldn't afford. And so they moved to Texas. And so, yes, they were able to get jobs, but they were able to buy a large house in Texas for
It's a
$150,000.
large house thing.
which, no, the point is, they were trying to live in Cambridge, starting a family.
That's it.
And they were unable to, right, because they work in Cambridge. Not everyone has the ability to, move 30 minutes away and commute. So
Well, what are they doing in Texas?
they're.
Well, anyway, okay.
Well, they're doing it in Texas because they got a job there, right? I mean, they got.
So is your point that some of the population statistic might change if there was a different housing?
My point is that when you're looking at the
Economy.
demand for housing, you have to look at the people who, our population is growing, but how many people, how, is it growing because we are having births in the state?
No.
But the flip, well, let me just get back to theoreticals. You have to look at all the components, which are, there aren't people who are leaving, and it may be growing slower because there are people leaving, and if we actually were able to give affordable housing, they would stay. And so we would see a larger housing. So if you just look at say, we're only growing by 5%. but the point
I don't
is-
know if that's accurate or not. I mean,
don't.
obviously, that could be studied, as
Yeah,
part
I
of what
agree.
Representative Day is saying, but I'm not sure that that's accurate. I don't know.
We
But
actually would.
anyway,
All I'm saying is that's an added wrinkle, that's all.
I
I don't
understand.
know how many there are people
Yeah.
are like that, but anecdotally, I know of people who have left because of that
I
reason.
thought this was a really constructive discussion, and it was so nice of Representative Day to come. So, town meeting articles, and I know this was some discussion last meeting. So Brian, do you want to just kind of update us on where we are on this?
Yeah.
Thank you.
They got
With
3
bigger
copies
print.
now.
Do you have 721? This is from,
This from last week?
the one from last week, I took all those comments, and that's here.
Is that what's in the meeting? 721, but that's a better version. Can I use that one?
Yeah, I made them
Thank you.
bigger
Yeah,
because
that'd be great.
it's kind of an issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so are we going in order, change one first?
I was gonna do a quick recap.
Okay, good, that'd be great.
And then, so we left off at, we've gone through change 4.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I shouldn't say that we've completely gone through change 4. I'm gonna say very quickly. So, change 1 is ready to go. That's a green. Change 2.
Why don't you just give like a 5-second,
Sure, change 1 was changing the word report to recommendations.
okay, got it.
That's it. Change 2, this was, we called this yellow. We were, when we send it, this is going to be, we're gonna ask Art to clear some of this language up related to neighborhood character. And then I
Bullet
was,
number 4
yep, and
on the
then,
second page.
right, here's neighborhood character, including historic. All of these,
I'm gonna label the numbers again
sure.
on the big draft, just so we're all are talking about the same page.
Sure. So that's change 2. I was asked to put in the same language that we use for the clause for a ZBA when it goes against a significant opinion. So.
All right, can we just pause on this for a minute? So, was there like a separate vote on this?
Liz?
Well, for change 2, it was.
I'm not saying there had to be, I'm just kind of curious because I wasn't
So it
there.
was change 2, Liz, and it had to do with if the Board of Appeals disagrees with the recommendation of other boards and committees when there is a consensus regarding the special permit application, it shall explain its position in its written decision. This was based upon a clause that we had done in the curb cut bylaw that the 4 members here last week said, we would like you to put that clause back in, or not, we would like you to put that clause in this situation as well.
We also asked that Art take a look at this section.
I'm not, at this moment though, I'm not sending things to Art. Yeah,
It's just, we'll keep that in our notes.
yeah.
That goes to Art, which is, this section right here. Go to Art to clean up.
Yeah, no,
The
I got
intent
it.
is there, we
Yeah.
all agree the intent is there, but how it is expressed is unclear to people outside of this board.
Well, no, I was just kind of curious, yeah, exactly. But I was just kind of curious if you guys had a vote on that. I'm just trying to get
Yeah, I
up to
would
speed
say
on
so.
what you
There's
did or didn't
definitely
do.
consensus. There's nothing.
No, I'm not asking about consensus, I'm just curious if it was a vote or not.
I don't remember.
I don't believe there was a formal
Okay.
vote.
On the town meeting articles now.
Yeah, last.
Okay, no, that's fine. I mean, it's easier if there wasn't, but I just wanted to know one way or the other.
All right, so you added the language in.
Yeah, but this looks like, so for change 3, I was asked, it said change, it was, the board may grant such special permit where does not have an adverse effect upon an historic resource, and the proposed construction is compatible in scale and character with the existing.
Right. This,
So
we
you said
wrestled
they
with
had
this
to
for a
positive.
while,
So
yeah.
it was a may, we changed it to a may, that was the big, rather than the shall, and we did to positive. Then this became green as well,
Yep.
based upon that change.
Yep.
Okay. Change number 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting going through all these again, because we were living with these all last year, so it's nice that they're being kind of sculpted.
So, so we had left off, right, okay, so this change was also made. So change number 4 with historic resources, from the very beginning, there was only an issue with subsection C. That was the only thing that there was that anyone had any issue with. We ended up looking at CFR Title 36, Part 60, Section 60.4, and just said it should just reference that. So it's determined to be this is the change from the previous week, was a cultural resource. The idea was using the word historic resource in the definition of historic resource didn't make sense. It turns out in the CFR, they used the word cultural resource. It made it even that much more sense to use those words. So C has been changed to what's just on your sheets and on the screen, to be determined to be a cultural resource based on the criteria set forth in the CFR. The Historical Commission got out of this because we had decided that it does not matter who is implementing this federal criteria, meaning a consultant for someone
It
could
would have been
hire.
really nice to have this kind of in brackets, so we didn't have to look it up again, but okay. I'm just kind of curious, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just that whether or not it would include something that maybe, I'm sorry, but for lack of a better word, isn't official. But let me just look this up, but go ahead.
Sure.
While you're looking at the section 60.4, I'm actually wondering if you take that specific subsection out, because in an earlier section, other than 60.4, it talks about how this can be used by local.
So you just say
Section,
so
part
either
60.
Part 60 or.
Yeah, and
no.
take the other part out, because one, they could change how it's applied in the previous, I just leave that as Part 60.
Okay.
I just am, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be picky here, but I think that everybody should have this in front of them before we decide whether or not we want to make reference to this.
Are you talking about the
Title 6, 36, Part 60, Section 60.4.
The Code of Federal Regulations?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, Brian, like anytime we make or propose something that would have a reference to a particular provision, criteria for evaluation, that we ensure that everyone on the board has read it.
Well, I know I've read it.
Yeah, no, but, I'm sorry.
No,
Let me be more
no, I know.
specific.
It's
So
available
that
right
we
now for immediate
no,
reference.
Yeah, so that we're talking about whether or not we want to embrace this because some of the feedback last year, Heather, before you were on the board, was whether or not, why are we citing something that, whether or not we need to or not. I mean, that was some of the feedback we got in general. I mean, I just want to make sure that everyone knows what this is. A wide diversity of resources. Yeah, I mean, I think I may have been the one who suggested this from the beginning, when we were downstairs in the little room. And, because I was looking this up while we were trying to help, come up with a definition. But some of the feedback we got, I mean, this is very long. I think some of the feedback is like, do we even know what all that is? And, I mean, I think one of the positives is that it's kind of broad, that it would incorporate things that A and B wouldn't. And that, I guess, was part of the idea of why I thought it had some appeal. Some of the feedback we got, though, was whether or not this basically meant that anything, I think I'm characterizing this correctly, that anything could be this.
Yeah, I mean, what this basically.
So I think we should discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, this says A, B, or C, and C being, it could be A or B. That's all. So that's all. It's saying that it's eligible to be on A or B. So the CFR is what section 60.4, that criteria, that's what's used for, I'll go back here. So that is the criteria that's used to say whether or not something can be listed individually or is contributing asset on a national register of historic or state register of historic places. So, Heather, I would imagine that for A and B, it has to be.
Yeah, we're not
you have to
talking about
use
A
the-
and B. I mean, we got A and B. That's kind of clear on its face. So the question is about C.
But what I'm saying is that A and B, the only thing that C is saying is that whether it could be A or B. That's, meaning they're all linked. It's A, B, or could be A and B. That's what C is describing. Because you
Well,
use,
C has a lot of concepts that aren't in A and B.
that's how.
No, that's how you
That's how you-
define A
that's
or
how
B.
That's how it becomes listed individually or contributing listed on the national. I mean, it has to go through that criteria that's listed, that CFR. So in order to get listed here on either of these two lists, it has to be, yeah.
Let me jump in and say, that's not really true.
That's what we've been doing related to demo delay.
No. But is it citing, well, let me try this a different way. The criteria at the local level are different, I'll defer to Heather, from national significance. National register is a very high level, and local significance does not always mean
Right,
national.
but I would agree with you, yeah, but isn't, so the one issue that someone did have was the fact that CFR is in the actual language where it's here. It talks about important in prehistory or history, or it talks, when does it talk about national?
I mean, it's very broad. I mean, there's great things in here in this statutory provision. It's just, the question is whether or not, and I'm not saying yes or no to any of this, I'm just, for point of discussion, I think the question is whether or not we think it's a good idea to have this term, historic resource, be defined to include what is all these different criterias, which actually arguably could be almost anything. And whether or not, that seemed to be some of the spirit of the feedback we got so vehemently.
Oh, that I'm not so concerned about.
I'm not concerned about whether or not we agree or that. I mean, I think the point is legitimate, that if it's so broad, which this definitely is, then does that almost like take away from the strength of how we're defining it?
So the question was, do you go to a different definition of historical resource other than outside of what the Department of Interiors does?
Right.
Or do we stick with the definition by the Department of Interiors?
I mean, the
That's
main,
really discussion.
the main problem with this change that someone brought up, the two people brought up, was the fact that they said, well, does this mean that at any time the historical commission could deem something to be historically significant? And the answer is yes, and they can do that now, regardless of whether this is
Yeah.
there or not. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. But that was their argument. It didn't have to do necessarily with CFR. It had to do with, I buy a house, it's not on any lists, and then at any point in time, I want to do something to it, and now all of a sudden, it's historically
I guess
significant.
what I-
This was the
yeah.
problem.
I
Except
could-
the bylaw says you can go at any time and get defined if you are or not.
Yeah, I guess my kind of reaction to the feedback we got, which was very with strength presented.
Gusto.
Yeah, is that it made me kind of like jump ahead and imagine town meeting floor. And I kind of started thinking to myself, do we want to take on more than we have to? And we don't want this to have issues because of some kind of taking on more than maybe is necessary, especially where there's no definition now.
Well, I
and-
think that's
and
the problem,
So here
that's why
it
there's
is.
an issue,
Yeah,
I think.
No, I know, but maybe it could be something like, toning the language, kind of framing the language, sort of like, instead of so definitively here, sorry for the pun, determined to be a cultural resource based on the criteria, or, maybe something along the lines of, and utilize, under, various resources, including, under various kind of sources of information or something, including that kind of allow this to be a, like a measure if it's relevant, but not that it has to be. I don't know, I'm just kind of
I'm okay
throwing
with
that out.
but if
I'm
you-
not, I'm sorry, but I think the problem there is it opens us up to being even more vague.
Right. that would
Because
be
you're
nice.
saying, well, this is one of the
I
criteria.
know, but I think
What are
that
the-
the part of the legitimacy of that feedback was that, why are we saying it has to be this? Which it doesn't. I mean,
It doesn't, but then we have to come up with
There's
a
no good
coherent.
reason why it shouldn't be. I mean, that's not I'm not saying that's the best reason, but
At least it's here's Jackie, the phrase I would use, this is an accepted, at least that,
I totally understand. That's why we were down there and I came up with this on my phone. But I totally get the other side of this, which is, especially the way this is,
so.
maybe
but
it's
the
just
other-
sort of change
so
some
you're
of
debating
this.
in your mind, but the other
Yeah.
side is that we do our own creative writing and bring our.
I know, but we got like sort of feedback that we definitely need to
But if we do
consider.
our creative
Wait,
writing
no, I know,
stuff,
but
we
excuse me,
have
it's not black and white. We can change some of this terminology to sort of suggest this as a, because really what, all we're saying is that this is a resource to be looked at, that it doesn't have to definitely, because this isn't even clear in and of itself.
Let me just throw this out, devil's advocate for Brian's favorite role. If we did that, I would say we'd get criticized for that too, so.
I know, but honestly, when you pull this up, this isn't crystal clear either.
There's nothing that will be crystal clear on this.
Right, so, I mean, we could just kind of change some of the lingo in here. Determined to be a cultural resource based on, but I mean, who's doing the
The
determining?
It's gonna end up being the ZBA.
Yeah,
The Historical Commission sends a report, and they have to, if they do not find that is based on the language that we added,
But I mean,
In the
cultural
previous-
resource, is that a different term?
cultural resources defined in
It's
the
a
section.
standard.
Excuse me?
Well, yeah,
No, is it a
runs
term
through-
defined in our bylaws?
no.
No, so what we're doing with, all I'm saying is we might want to reword subsection C.
The cultural resource is defined in
The CFR.
the CFR. It specifically says,
I understand, yeah, but,
so that we, I don't think we need a definition of cultural resource.
or maybe don't use it. I mean, I like the concept personally, but I'm not talking about my personal view.
But the point, the reason why the words cultural resource were used was because that's specifically what this federal regulation is.
That's the word they use.
And it
And
runs
so
through
we-
state law as well.
And so the discussion was that we should use the exact wording.
Yeah.
If we're going to depend upon this reg, then we
I,
need to.
trust me, I know, and somebody who doesn't even have working knowledge of this found this, okay? But nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we're not doing our job to make sure that we're wordsmithing this.
But just throw, so. I-
And where does it say that this is definitely a definition of cultural resource in this CFR?
60 point.
60 point what?
60.2.
Criteria for evaluation.
Effects of listing. The National Register is an authoritative guide.
It's to evaluate. So what we're saying in subsection C is determined. I just
Right.
think that we should,
The definition is in 60.2, the first sentence. It says, "This is used to identify the nation's cultural resources." And that's the only phrase. it
but
uses.
identifying, I don't know, determined
say-
is an interesting word. I'm not sure determined is the right word for subsection C. Who's determining?
Or identify. I'm fine with changing it to identify.
Yeah, I don't know what cares.
Because determining suggests like a process.
I hope there's a process.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I mean, I think everyone would be really upset if there weren't.
Right.
I mean, identifying and determine both have a process behind them. We discussed whether or not a particular agency of the town should be called out in this section.
we specifically
It
did
was
not.
We
unnecessary.
specifically said that it wasn't necessary because.
Well, it's not necessary for A and B, that's clear, because those are already kind of like, those sources
Right,
are
but
listed.
the point was that
Could
the
hinder
the
someone.
ZBA is present. It depends upon, if you're going for a special permit, then the ZBA is going to have to determine that.
Right.
if you're gonna go in front of the Historic Commission and see if it's a tear down, then the Historic Commission's gonna have to
Right.
determine that.
But I still don't understand cultural resource. I mean, I don't have personally a problem, that, I'm not talking about my personal view. So in 60.2, it talks about the nation's cultural resources. So are you guys equating cultural resource with historic resource?
It runs everywhere, yes. I absolutely think that's such a standard term, I guess you could say, that runs through.
I'm not talking about what anybody else does. I'm talking about for Winchester. Because if we're talking about historic, do we want to take on, like a cultural resource is at the Winchester Recreation
Well, yeah.
Department?
Why? Because the cultural resources, first of all, they can have historical significance, but they
Right.
can also have, this is your basic survey form, they can also have architectural significance.
Exactly.
So they're different, but that's why.
That's right.
It's architectural and historical, and that's why cultural embraces all of that.
But cultural can also be non-historic.
Correct. So, no, cultural is the big umbrella word.
Exactly.
For historic and architectural, those two converge.
Well, I'm just telling you, the way this is, the way it's currently worded means a historic resource could actually be a cultural resource that isn't historic.
Well, we have, the only extra thing I can throw in to muddy the waters
I
is
think we should
this
take
is
out that
called
term.
National Register of Historic Places. So the word historic is in the title of the
That's true.
regulations.
Even though it's cultural, yeah.
And it describes cultural, and then it goes on to talk about buildings and other things.
But
So,
in Massachusetts
Well, I mean, we
Historical Commission.
I mean, the reason why we used cultural was only to try to bring the wording in our zoning bylaw into parallel with what was in the regs.
I know, but it doesn't, I think it causes more problems. I mean, what we could do is take out the term cultural resource, even though personally, I like that term, I'm looking at this procedurally.
So what do we do with?
And then if you say, I'm talking about C, if you take out, and you say something like,
What's called-
determined to be a historic resource,
Well, that-
based
that's what
on the
was in there
criteria.
Last week, and then we said, why are we defining the word historic resource with, defined to be a historic resource if that's not even the word they're using?
Well, then we could,
Well,
well,
it's just,
the
it
title
just,
says historic,
You want
so.
it to say
Yeah, I
historic
mean-
as a
Just,
definition?
can we at least?
I mean, what we're saying is that we're pulling out of section 60.4, sort of an evaluative, like measuring tools that relate to historic buildings, not that relate to, like, cultural ones.
Well, then change it to historic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing this out, having a, I just think that it causes more problems, and I think the idea with these is that we don't do more than is necessary in general, so that we can easily communicate this and have it embraced and passed.
What about if you say determined to be a resource?
Yeah, I
based
had
on
that
the-
thought too,
to-
just
or-
that.
Resource is a bizarre word, because it has.
Well, but it's not.
But
just
there's
any
only one type of
resource, it's
resource that's based on the CFR Title
right.
36.
think
I
that does
agree,
it.
Well, you know what, backing up where it says which has
Yes,
been.
good. We're
Backing up,
resolved.
maybe we should take out which has been. So I think maybe this should be at the beginning, and forgive me for thinking out loud, I'm just trying to be quick. A building area, neighborhood, or other structure such as, or including, or, as opposed to has been, because that puts the emphasis on something having been declared when these A and B by definition have been declared. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on those lists. Such as, and then C could be
Sure, so that fixes the tense of the verb.
based on criteria.
But I'm not happy, I mean, why don't we just deal with the word historic versus cultural? I think leaving the word resources bare is too vague. And so I'm happy to go and say historic because that's the name in the reg.
Yeah,
So my vote is for historic.
Right, but I think we should also take out has been at the beginning. Did we
I
ever agree with that?
agree,
Yeah.
but that's a separate
Okay,
issue.
such as,
That's a
yeah, but
separate
but
issue.
it flows, because otherwise we don't know what we're doing. So,
Right, but can we
or other
just-
structures such as, and then just put that as a placeholder, A and B, and then for C, based on criteria set forth. And I think we're still perhaps gonna have some issues with it, but we could just let that marinate for a little bit until our next meeting.
See
You're
again,
saying-
No, I would
Wait, you
really
said
like to get this
such-
done tonight.
Such as a historic resource? Though I missed that.
I think it should be which is A, B, or C, which is based on the
Or
criteria
other
set forth.
structure which is listed included or,
That's an idea. I kind of was thinking such as gives us more wiggle room, but okay, so let's just put that in for right now, which is A, B, and then C could be, and
Based on
take
the
out
criteria.
determined, because that's a horrible verb for what we're doing here with the C.
It's a building area, neighborhood, or structure which is based on the criteria set forth in the Code of Federal Regulations, which meets.
Doesn't make any sense, that's bad English. I mean, which is, again, implies
Such
it's
as.
already been determined.
Yeah, I know exactly, which I think
So
is
I
an
think-
issue for C, such as,
Such as means it's not limited to these three.
exactly, because
So-
C is so open, who knows what it is anyway.
It could mean there's an implicit D that we haven't listed, so,
Such as a historic resource based on criteria set forth in
see,
blah, 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 blah.
I don't like such as, and I think I mean,
We'll put it in as a place saver that we'll fix, but at least it kind of like makes.
I
the
would
three
love to
parallel.
fix C first.
Yeah, I know, but we're just making sure it grammatically flows. So C then would be a historic resource based on criteria set forth in, historical, sorry. And we could just kind of, I mean, Diab, I know that there's an interest in finishing this, but this one, I think, was the one we got the most heat on.
I
The
think that
draft. So I think if we go back to this next meeting, that's okay too, after everybody kind of like really thinks about it a little longer. But I'd say that's potentially an improvement.
Okay, but I'm not happy leaving such as in there tonight, because I think.
Okay, well, what's your suggestion?
Well, such as implies there are additional constraints that you can put on, and we are not. We're limiting to
No,
those three.
That's an important point.
We're limiting it to these three.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you could just take out such as maybe and just have the colon after structure.
Well, how about that is?
Well, we can just say which, and then A will be are listed, B would be are included, and C will be determined to be.
Oh, we can't have
But, yeah,
determined.
she had major issues with determined.
I don't care about the word determined or identified, but let's put a verb in as the front of each of those phrases so just change structure such as into which.
Or you could say for a verb evaluated
that.
as,
That A, are listed,
it is.
Well, it is, a building.
oh, I'm sorry, we're in the singular, so is listed. B, is included, or C, is identified as.
It works for me.
As a.
I think that's definitely better than what we had
It's as a,
before.
right where you're at.
But,
Yeah, oh,
Oh, okay, I see it, you got it.
as a-
I mean, I still think, I think that's way better than what it was.
Yeah, at this
I
point.
love having cultural out of there and determined out of there, but I do think just for us to, if anybody has further thoughts at another meeting, we don't have to drop
keep it
dead
down.
on this right now, because I can just tell you, there's gonna be a lot of heat on this.
Sure. Well, we're
And,
done.
and I think it's arguably legitimate,
Well, no,
because
and-
this
and I know
definition is so
because-
broad, and, excuse me, will require, you know, if we want to keep this, you know, a very specific response.
Well, I would say the answer is historic resources already is in the zoning bylaw without any definition. So without it, we're still floating free.
No, we're not talking about why have a definition, we're talking about C. Because some people would say just stop at B.
Well, that's, I think, by any way you look at what happens both nationally and at the state level, that historic resources do go beyond the National Register listings, that's all.
You can
Well,
also opt out of those listings. That's the other reason why you have to put this in. So you can't just go.
Well,
into your
I guess
meeting.
it's also like the concept that it evolves and it depends on what the structure is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to have something else. But I'm just saying that we'll want like a very clear, concise response that, you know, will have to be developed. You know, because a lot of people probably would want to dump C.
I think also, Brian, when we talked about this last week or the week before, last week, is we discussed specifically that it actually originally had the historical commission. If they identified it, That's,
And,
it's
yeah,
pretty much locked, and that's why we
one-
took the historical commission out of it. So yes, the historical commission will review it and provide the recommendation and their information that they need to. But it also gives anyone an opportunity to almost,
Well, it gets someone to hire a consultant so that they can say, look, no, I
This is
mean,
not.
this is not, or
Yeah, I mean,
gives them some, or if they want to, then it does. I mean,
I think there should be a difference between definitions and policy, and who does it as policy. So each individual section which talks about historic resource could say, and if we wanted to, say the policy in this particular section is to rely upon this agent.
Except
to
we're
do-
not establishing policy,
Well, we're writing the zoning bylaws, so that's policy.
but we don't grant the permits.
But the zoning bylaws control that, so that's, I don't know, I,
well, that's why we
it's
added,
almost an
Sure.
existential conversation.
yes, this is a semantic conversation, which you will
but that's
probably
why
win.
we added that
So
language.
I will just say that, yes, the definition should not imply who is going to, we don't, nowhere else in the definitions do we say, this is the person who actually
No.
makes
Can I
it.
ask a question? Does this include, like, you know, the list, the Winchester list? Would A and B include those?
the Winchester list.
Well, whatever you guys have, like, that used to be on cards or something that got done in
No, 'cause it-
1970 or
the
something?
opt-outs.
No, I'm just asking, would A and B, because this, you know, the terminology is sort of like national in Massachusetts, but I mean, would this include the properties that have been identified, which
Yeah,
is
'cause-
incomplete in Winchester?
But they came out
Excuse
of,
Only
me,
the ones
would
that-
A and B include those?
Most, yeah. I mean,
No, it wouldn't be most, no,
How
it'd
would
be
it
just
not be?
properties up to 1969.
That's the
And-
problem that we've
Or
done.
done, so it's
Funded back
1917.
planner,
Right,
the
so
survey.
I guess what I'm wondering is for
Surveys are
C,
gonna-
if we should also kind of say something like, and/or has been deemed by the historical commission, this isn't verbatim, but something that would include that what's been determined in Winchester, because A and B are arguably state and national, and if there's the subset of properties that wouldn't be included in A and B, but that have already been determined on some list or whatever.
But the bigger problem was that the survey was only done up to 1917. so
The
that-
list we have stops at 1917, so it misses every property that's post-dates 1917, so everything that's built from 1917
Right, but whatever there is, that list up to 1917?
is incomplete also, because they only took so many properties.
Okay, well, whatever it is, I just want to make sure that we don't have to redefine all those again. That, in other words,
They-
something that's already been locally defined, would that be included in A and B or not?
No, it needs to be redefined to see if it,
it would be included under C, essentially.
No, I know, but that's why I'm wondering, okay, if that's the case, then maybe C should say something like, maybe the C should be D, and a new C should be something along the lines of, has been determined by the Winchester Historical Commission, because we've got state and local here, state and national here under A and B, and we don't have anything that's already been determined in Winchester, so why should it be redetermined under this criteria of the federal CMR?
because it's always changing and evolving. The
I know,
local
but don't
list
you
is
want to
always changing.
have like whatever has been determined?
I think that
That's
would come in
mo-
under C anyway.
No, I know, but why have it have to be kind of re-looked at? So like, let's say there's property X that's on that 1917 list or something. Or maybe that was just evaluated under the new
New survey-
bylaw.
A new survey. Let's,
Yeah.
why don't we say, because this is actually happening, there's a new survey going on right now. So
Right,
they
let's say
see-
there's
they-
property X that's either on the 1917 one or the new one. So arguably, would that property not be an A and B, or possibly could not be an A and B?
It may not be an A or B.
Right, so then we don't want to have it be reevaluated under C. Maybe we have CBD, C, be item D, and have a new number C that says, identified by the Winchester Historical Commission.
But wouldn't, let me just step back. Anything which has currently been determined, which is not on A and B, but has been determined by a historical commission, presumably, and this is my presumption, they have used this federal reg to make their decision.
It should be separate. It should be D. There should be 4. Because it should be that if Winchester's already done something, that's clear that that's covered. Because what's currently C is almost like a catch-all, hey, using these tools, maybe you fit in here too.
But
So,
isn't-
but if it's already been done, and there's some, how is that kind of preserved right now? There's some new list Or who does that? Winchester Historical
You
Commission?
could actually take A and B out of there and just have C as the only definition for an historical resource.
Well, okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
But just so that,
yeah.
just to give something, so that it's just not, so that if something is under A or B, it's definitely all set. So that we don't have to have properties that would be under A or B, then kind of be at the mercy of some evaluation of C. Do you see what I mean? So,
I get it.
and for that same reason, it seems like any property that's already been identified in Winchester by a Winchester board should definitely be in category C, and what's currently C should be D. Because it shouldn't be that this has to be revisited. And who is that entity? Is it Winchester Historical
Correct,
Commission?
yes.
Then that should be C, and current C should be D.
I think it confuses things by adding more things. I'm going
What are you
along-
talking about? If something's already been identified in Winchester, that we wouldn't care for that to be part of the definition of historic
But if
resource?
it's already in that list because of C, then
Oh,
it's
excuse
already
me,
covered.
you're assuming a lot about C.
I said if.
I know, but see, why have that be up to somebody to have to figure out whether or not something comes within that CMR?
But presumably, if a property comes in.
Why have A or B if you're not gonna identify Winchester?
Because it presumably, if a property has come in.
No, I understand what you're talking about
No, no,
theoretically,
well,
but
Let me go
yeah.
through this process as to how.
I totally
to
get you, I'm
CMR.
way ahead of what you're
I'm
saying.
not sure you do, because
I totally
you,
am.
because you disagree with me, so we're obviously reaching different conclusions, so perhaps we're
Doesn't mean I
working on-
don't understand what you're saying.
Well, let me say it first, and let's see,
Oh, that's like
okay?
fun.
If a property comes in to be reviewed, the first thing I presume that the ZBA would do would ask the Historic Commission, have you reviewed this property? Does it fall under the definition of historic?
Well, guess what?
And at that point, the Historical Commission would say, we have reviewed this property, we have used these criteria, and it's presumably, if it's on A and B, as Heather pointed out, it automatically has been done via C. So if it has already been done under the aegis of C, then all we need is C. If it has not yet been done, then someone has to do it.
I'm surprised that you care that much, because why have A or B? Because A or B comes within C also.
I'm agreeing with what Heather said, which was just remove A and B and just.
I know,
have
but
them.
the whole point here is to make this like easy, to actually put meat on the bones of what this concept means, not just say, hey, go look somewhere else where there's like 9 criteria.
But if you needed to.
That's not helping.
But if you need to understand.
Either have A, B, and a reference to Winchester, or don't even have A and B.
But I suppose another is that if you throw too many of these, okay, I'll call them out. It's listed National Register or State Register, and by the way, those are identical in this state. Option 2, it's on their inventory, or option 3, as you're proposing, Winchester's, it was the old list. And then option 3, it's this, it's got to be identified by some agency not named, or some individual with a consultant not named. My concern would be that by calling out the others, that the last group, which hasn't been identified, is going to be a lot weaker because it's not in one of those other groups.
I mean, you could have A be the Winchester list.
There are things that are noted as historic resources on our town's outdated list that are not historic resources. That's my problem.
Oh, okay.
And now they are now being, if we add them in here, they're gonna be defined as historic resources.
There are a couple things,
I think-
but there aren't too many.
Yeah, but I think we have a chance to come up with a clean definition. And my concern is that if we include language which keeps shoehorning in old stuff, we end up with an unworkable definition, which 10 years from now just will be a.
So what are you wanting to do? I'm sorry, I'm getting.
I'm just going with Heather's suggestion, which may or may not have been your final one, is to just have a single statement, which is C.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And I think it's clearer, but I'm obviously not obviously other people have
Should we-
different.
A lawyer would have a heyday with C.
And
Okay, because there's like 9, I'm not disagreeing with you in concept. I mean, I wish the world was a perfect place. But I mean, you've got like 10 different subsections. I mean, how
So-
is that adding to the definition? Like,
But
also, have you looked at this? I mean, that means like
I
a
have
birth,
looked at
I
it,
remember
but-
Charles saying, a birthplace, like who decides
Well,
who
then
was
we
important?
have to worry about A and B because A and B are reliant upon C. So why wouldn't a lawyer have problems with A and B? I don't know that, since this is a federal law which has been in place for many years, I don't see that, I mean, and this has presumably been taken to court and challenged, et cetera, yet has stood the test of time at some level. I don't know that, I don't see how the legal argument.
What are you talking about? I mean, that's why we're here, why we're elected, is to reflect what our local town wants, not to just say, oh, the feds came up with a definition, let's just bootstrap that. I'm not against this, obviously, I'm the one who suggested this, but I'm just saying, this is not black and white. What
Well-
this, federal reg is, it's like 10 different criteria.
It's not an easy process.
Yeah, and I think this is a great fruitful conversation too, by the way. I don't think we should rush this.
I don't disagree, but if A and B,
That's important.
if A and B are reliant upon C, because that's how they're determined to be on A and B, then we already are using this definition, or someone has. And
Well,
if
I
we
don't
do-
know, I don't know how A and B were constructed. I don't know whether or not some of those buildings maybe were determined before
Well,
section, the CFR
we
was
just
even
heard from
passed.
two people at this table who said that A and B are reliant upon C.
That's
Yes.
true.
And so I will defer to them because I know nothing about this field.
No, but I'll also say Jackie's the one who goes into litigation, so your feeling is that.
I'm
the
just
more
saying
you
C is
spell
sort of like
out-
a-
Jackie,
it's-
listen,
yep.
You feel that in litigation that it would be stronger because you've given more? Okay, now I happen to know a certain lawyer who says sometimes you're better off not giving too much. So, not spelling it out.
I mean, look at subsection F. I'm not knocking this. I'm just suggesting how, if this is part of the definition, who knows what people are gonna, how this is gonna be interpreted. A property primarily commemorative in intent, if design, age, tradition, or symbolic value has invested it with its own exceptional significance. I mean, these are great terms, but it's all in the eye of who's determining this.
But
There's-
that's,
So if something's already been,
but anything we write will be in the eye of who's determining it.
not
That's the
if there's an
response.
actual list. So,
But we can't,
can't go into
but
this
we have to
route.
look,
Yeah, the actual list scares me a little bit.
Yeah,
because
we
it-
can't reference that list because first of all, it has no name. Second of all.
but can't you say has been deemed by Winchester Historical Commission?
No, it was volunteers. It's another problem. It's done by volunteers and half of them
It's-
were.
The list is, as you're calling it.
No.
The list has.
But I mean, what
problems.
about in the future, something that's been determined by
There's no-
Winchester
It would
Historical
be determined
Commission?
based upon
C.
C.
Millions of dollars
I
of
mean,
work.
One, very, very quick, Heather, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, if I remember, one of the reasons that we started to even use something that looked like this definition was because of demo delay and those definitions. This is almost verbatim of demo delay?
Well, we've changed it a little bit, but yes. it is,
Almost, okay,
yes.
so I won't use the word verbatim. It's very, very similar
But
to
can
the.
you pull it up? I mean, it'd be so easy to just pull it up.
It's pretty much, it was verbatim, but we've kind of manipulated it a little bit in the last two meetings. It originally was verbatim.
Okay. You mean us, this board?
This planning board, yes.
So, right, we just changed this identified, but the idea is that what was there before we just changed these few words now, went through town council, and they had no problems with it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And, Jackie's looking at also the small section that is 60.4. However, in 60.4 in the beginning,
Here.
they specifically note the how-to publications,
Right.
which is a 65-page document, and goes through each of these items and says
How to evaluate
exactly
it, yeah.
how you can do it. So it's not as easy as saying, I think John Smith was a significant person in our past because he rode a horse. You can't do that. You have to go through and build, why is that important to our history in town? What is that contributing to our history? So you have, it's not as easy as people think you can do it based on using that 65 page. It goes through exactly how you define significance of that event and what does that mean to our community and why that loss is hurtful to us.
Well, I just want to make sure that whatever definition we come up with, that, first of all, and if we have to make some changes with well, we would have to actually ask someone to make some changes, I guess, for the general bylaw, for the demo delay. I mean, I would like.
I think it's great to be consistent, that's a
Right, so
brilliant
I would like
idea.
it to be the same.
I know,
Like
and-
exactly the same
But
to
so
the
I have it in
letter.
front of me, 3.5, which I assume is what it is. 3.5, and the demo delay, 3.5?
Yeah.
Everybody, is that
I don't
right?
know if I have-
So I don't, are you saying that the CFR is cited in here?
It is cited at the
It
base
is.
point of the,
Well, it's cited in the footnote.
yes,
criteria for
That's right, it
which I
determining.
liked it better.
Wait, that's right, it did get put into, it wasn't in a footnote originally, and it got put in the footnote
And
towards
that
the,
is
towards the
actually
end.
what one of the audience members, when we were going through you were going through this, and I was in the audience, there's a member of the planning board, specifically said, is that instead of quoting all of, is just do the bullet points that are outlined.
The 4, right, so.
Yeah.
So
where are
we
you?
could just adopt this.
Yeah,
Here,
I mean, it'd be nice to be consistent, although we call that historical
It's these
significance.
yeah.
It's 3.5, right? Criteria for determination of an eligible building.
No, not eligible building.
Are you gonna pull it up?
I unfortunately don't have the general bylaw, I gotta bring it up from online, so hold on.
It's like the
Wait,
first
I
time
got
I've
it
ever
from
not
our
had it.
website.
Yeah, that's right.
It's called proposed, right?
I don't think they've updated
I don't think they have, well, it's not,
it should have been.
Chapter
updated.
yeah, no,
14.
no, it definitely should. It's
Chapter
definitely
14,
14.
preservation of historically significant buildings, 3.5.
Yeah.
Let's see,
Is there a way to turn on the outlets, Brian?
there should be on,
Okay.
at least, I don't know, mine's on.
Okay. Well,
How's that for?
I think there's an outlet right behind you if you have a cord.
I'm plugged into the big one, so.
I love this definition. This is so nice.
It's cleaner. We cleaned it up, because,
Well, no, but I mean,
So the most recent.
and you guys didn't bother with having those lists. How'd we end up with the lists?
what list?
Just the ones we have as A and B. Yeah.
Okay, here, there's only one, I can go back to Tommy to see.
I mean,
So
I'm
this-
pulling this off our website, but it says proposed, so I don't know if this was the final one.
You need to go to the packet, but the packet isn't correct either.
This is nuts.
Can we request of you, Brian, that you get the town
Well,
clerk?
yeah, for some reason, the general bylaws, the code of
Yeah,
bylaws
right
is, yeah, I have it
It's out
here.
of date.
It's quite out of date, yeah, so I
Well,
I don't know what to tell you, I'll get it fixed. I'll talk to people. Well, I have it here. This is Article 3, this was the change.
There it is.
And this is eligible building,
Yeah,
this is not what we're talking about.
nope, 3.5.
Yeah.
I think it's a lovely idea to be consistent
Here
with
it
something
is.
that's already in
Here it
there.
is.
Yeah,
Here's the ABCD,
yep,
and with the subnote, or with the
Footnote.
reference here to what this is actually saying. So this is talking about is associated with events, lives, distinctive characteristics, and yielded or may be likely to yield information during history or prehistory. If you go, and that's where this is, events, lives, embodies distinctive characteristics.
I think we
that
should,
yielded
for
or may
ours,
be-
C should
Say-
be A. We should change the order. If we embrace these, because more than likely, we're not talking about like George Washington having slept
No.
there. We're talking about the actual architectural features. So what's in subsection C, maybe we'd want to have to move up. So I guess one of the general questions is, do we want to go with this approach, which has its benefits, because then it would be consistent, it's already been vetted, and totally change this number 4?
It leaves it less open for,
Actually,
Contention.
I think arguably it leaves it more open for interpretation, because these are words as opposed to like lists as far as A and B, but on the other hand, it's shorter than the title. And then the other thing, I think it might have been from that meeting where it was the footnote for determination. It's nice to just, which was my original concept tonight, was to say, sort of have use this as a reference, as opposed to saying, definitively as defined by. Because that CFR doesn't really, It's really a measurement tool. It's not a black and white definition. But I would definitely flip this order around and have subsection C be A. I don't know, what do you guys think? Because this is it's historic.
The request was to
significant.
mirror it
I-
by the residents at the time. If they don't like it.
Could I see that
Has to
footnote
mirror
again,
it.
please?
It says the criteria for determination of historical significance set forth in clauses A through D are the criteria for evaluation found in the code of,
The problem with this is that it does not say you also have to look at that 60-page guide to how you apply these criteria. All it does is say, we copied them from this document, but we're not actually referring to the rest of the document.
that was also a comment from,
Yeah, my concern is that this statement does nothing to provide guidance on how you actually evaluate A through D, or A through F, or however many we chose. And the wording, and I find this wording, I was not happy with this wording because it left out that we're actually gonna use these criteria the way this other document tells us to. This merely says, here are the criteria we're going to use, but there's absolutely no guidance on how you apply them. And that's what this whole federal reg provides, is the rest is that context. And so that's why I think it's important that we say that we are using this whole body of knowledge.
Well, it's a standard procedure for the historical, so it's, the bylaw for the historical commission is different because it's standard procedure to use that document. This, it's not written that it's a standard procedure, so the ZBA would have to write that it's a standard procedure in their rules and regs, which most likely won't happen. So you're saying we need to write it into this.
Yeah.
I think we need to write it in, and I think it's honest, because it tells people who read the definition how it's going to be applied. And I agree that it is vague, Jackie, but I don't know that
Look
there's,
at vague.
I don't know that there's any definition which won't require some sort of qualitative determination, because one person's important person is another person's, local yoga.
Well, I think that one of the nice things about the way the demo bill is set forth is that it gives you some kind of terminology right up front that you don't just have to then go look at another document, the way this is currently worded in our subsection C, which is kind of like, what? I have to go someplace else? You're supposedly giving me a definition. And it sort of extracts kind of some of the most important concepts to a historical resource as opposed to a cultural one in this, which I think makes it very helpful.
The technical person in me says that's what footnotes are for, but the non-technical person agrees with you. So I think you're right. I think we should copy those
Can you
few,
scroll up for me, Brian?
but I think we should be very specific in our
yeah.
bylaws or in our definition that these are applied using
Historically
the
significant
rest of the
It's not a
federal
historical
regs.
resource.
that's different.
So that's also an issue for me.
What is that?
That's the definition of a historically significant building.
I know, yeah,
Versus a
that's-
historical resource.
Exactly.
They're two different things.
I know, I mentioned that too. But
So,
what
So they
does that
shouldn't be-
difference?
so they
what-
shouldn't be
What is
mirrored
that
then.
difference?
or we go through the zoning.
What is that difference of whether
There
it's a
really
resource or
isn't. It had to be a
significant?
historically significant building based on the way the bylaw is written for demolition.
I know, but.
Because you can be a historical resource, but you can be a historical resource.
Preferably
that's-
preserved,
that's
but
not
it still would be significant though.
But that's what we had to do. You can't, a
Right.
historical building isn't always historically significant building.
I mean, I think we can say it's a historical
Yeah, but that's
resource.
interesting because we're already saying that we're comfortable with our definition of resource encompassing some of those concepts from the
Yeah,
same
I'm wondering-
statute.
I wonder if the answer should, this should be the definition of a significant historic resource.
Right,
Those
just
are
add the
ones
word
that-
significant in
yeah,
there.
Because
And then that would help
actually
it be
helps us- That actually
significant.
helps a lot, because then it's just not something, it's showing that it's not just something that's old.
Right,
Even though, like,
historically
I mean, everything
significant.
was so thought about when
so
the bylaw was
maybe,
written.
so that's
Historically
a change.
significant, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I like that. So the
Okay,
definition-
Historically significant
So,
resource.
and then we would have to go through, it's only mentioned, I think, 3 times.
Because if we
It's
start
not
coming
mentioned a
up,
lot
Anyways.
for
because if we
historic resource, but
start
it
coming
would be
up with
significant
like different variations of the term historic, oh my gosh, what a nightmare.
Significant historic resource. I agree.
Historically significant resource.
Historically significant.
Heather, you're gonna miss out. I'm just kidding. Yeah, because here it's historically
Just pause
significant
the
building, so it'd be
DVR at this
historically
point.
significant resource.
We shall freeze in our spot.
And then we can still reference, the statutory reference,
Yeah.
and have language
Are you going to
along the
need
lines
to
that Dia was
go-
saying, but I would give some of these, I would definitely have C
When you say C, you mean C from the federal
from the
regs?
demo,
Or from the demo,
Which
which
is-
is,
3.5.
which is part of the federal regs.
Which is the, embodies the distinctive characteristics
Yeah.
of a
Yeah.
type period, so focusing on the architecture.
I mean, let's just say, we want a definition where somebody doesn't have to go look up the federal regulation if there's kind of like the crux of it, the core of it on the historical building is in ours. We'd be like basically
Well,
adopting as opposed to saying,
well,
go look it up yourself,
I
which I don't
agree.
think is helpful.
I agree, and I think A through D in the demolition delay one is taken directly from the federal regs.
Yeah.
So I think we should, if we copy that in there.
But we changed the order.
Oh, I see, you want to put
C
C.
should be A
Oh, I'm
because
sorry,
it's so
I was confusing
silly.
that C with the C and.
No, because it's so silly how we start talking about where George Washington slept before we're talking about really what comes before us all the time, which is,
Right.
So you're saying then you would want to put is identified as a historically significant resource based on the criteria set forth below?
No. What she's saying is that if you look at these 4 criteria.
Yeah, those are here.
That you take, that if you put those 4 criteria in, reorder them so that C.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Where do they go? So they're going just underneath. All of them are going underneath C and say based on the criteria set forth below.
no, it's a building, area, neighborhood, or other structure which, and then it'd be what C would be A, embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction.
So Jackie, if we look at the
But
screen
yeah,
here,
that's
so we get
mixing.
an idea
Yeah.
of
But
what you're
that's
looking
mixing.
at.
That's mixing.
Would you be removing?
We'd be
A
taking
and
out
B?
A and B. We'd basically be doing what you're saying, but just basically expanding C.
So
Yeah.
remove A and B, so
Okay.
if you can.
I mean, I don't,
Just
frankly,
put
I
one
like
sentence
A
in
and B, but if you guys think it gets too cumbersome, take A and B out,
I mean,
and then it becomes embodies a distinctive characteristic, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I don't have a problem with A and B,
is
but,
clear, and it's also, I mean, it's. I don't want to use
I
the word. I
understand.
don't want to use the word standard, but
I mean, the
it's
other
found,
way you.
it's found in a lot of zoning bylaws in terms of.
Well, what you
using
could,
the-
but hey, we didn't do it in this one either. So what you could do is, structures that, and then you could say,
No,
A.
it is in there. It is in there. It's in a different. That's talking about significance, but for eligible building, it talks. I believe it does talk about these.
Okay,
exact things.
but you could still have all of the above. You could have A and B become C and D.
Uh-huh.
You could, but you could have what's here, subsection C, that embodies the distinctive characteristics as A. Because that's kind of like getting the concept out there right at the beginning. And you can say, or is listed on these things. And you could combine A and B to be, to be the new, so A is now gonna become embodies, see this, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. Heather's gonna come back and say, what happened?
We're in an alternate universe.
Low. He's being schizophrenic. Okay. Let's see what that does.
And then, or B, and and then you could say, like, comma, as referenced in CFR, blah, 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 blah,
Oh, sorry, this is-
based on criteria set forth in blah, 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 blah. That maybe would
I
make you
would-
happy.
I would claim that if we're gonna put A in, we may as well put in the other 3, because I think.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I would say that A, B, C, and D from the demo
From the demo,
delay get
yeah.
inserted here. The only odd thing is that we're reordering them, and some people might get distracted by the fact they're in a different.
well, the interesting thing though is that, let's see, a significant contract, I mean, how often do we have something that's a significant event or somebody lived there?
We
You
don't.
could,
But,
yeah, you
no,
could, what
but
you
it could happen at any time.
It could be that,
But what you could do is, you could just do A as the heart of it, and then say as, and other criteria from blah, 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 blah. Because A through D is a subset of that federal reg, and so
sure, I mean,
just put this down and see what it looks like for a while, then we can change it. But, where the or is, put, based on criteria set forth, based on, just see what it looks like, based on criteria set forth and then pull up the whole section 60.4. And then maybe do a semicolon, or, and then pick up A and B. See what you think of that, I don't know. We're throwing stuff against the wall.
I think
But we're not gonna
we
finish
should
tonight.
table this and go on to the next one.
Yeah, let's just finish this, just this one concept redraft, and then, yeah.
So we had embodies that distinctive based on the criteria set forth in the CFR 36, section 64, semicolon, or.
And then have those be B and C. Yeah, I don't know, this is not definite,
The
but
whole thing is
just,
clearly highlighted, so we'll.
yeah, I don't know.
Or it will be.
Anybody have a knee-jerk response to that, if that's a better thing or a worse thing?
well, D can be removed completely now.
Exactly.
All right.
I like the change in emphasis that part comes first, because it's much more in terms of,
Yeah, as opposed to just a perfunctory list.
yeah.
Yeah, can you scroll up so we get the whole beginning part? Historically significant.
I mean, let me go look back at what, yeah, my only concern, and I have to look at the other A, B, and D that we have left out, whether there's
Yeah.
something we missed.
Exactly,
So if you could put a note in there saying we left out A, B, and D,
yeah,
go look at
to
it.
double check. I mean, D, I think, is kind of a nice thing, has yielded or may be likely to yield information important to history or prehistory. A and B, just, I'm not saying they wouldn't be part of the criteria, it's just whether or not they're worthy of separate listing, you know, basically, did George Washington sit here?
But D is important because of burial grounds. And we did have a problem over at Bright Lock Farm where a construction,
You found some.
Oh, yeah.
they
Yep.
took out,
Oh, they
they
did?
actually removed
Mm-hmm.
a burial ground.
At Right Lock Farm.
Was it like the families?
It was unknown.
Probably, possibly, we don't know because it's gone.
Really?
But there,
How
yeah, there was
many?
no there was no headstone or anything like
Yeah, it was, so that's
Is it,
important.
Do they know how many?
I don't recall.
They got rid of it before the historical commission could, so we don't know any information about it that
Where
much.
was it? Was it close to the house?
It was on I don't remember where it was.
We're right back where we were last week.
We are,
We're at the
sorry.
end of change 4.
Wait, let's quickly do 5. What's 5?
No,
So-
we can't quickly do 5.
I was like,
We haven't
even finished 4.
We haven't
The
finished
two-family
four.
dwellings.
So basically, I added the words visually, so if you just read it again, so
We don't have a visual. We had a visual.
we don't want the visual's bad.
really?
Oh, really?
Well, so the
Okay, it
reason,
was described-
the reason why,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it basically said with that icon, and it was kind of like that it had to be split left and right, including a vertical wall all the way from the bottom to the top. So it basically said that there could be no, like one unit couldn't be bigger than the other, like you couldn't have any like
Right.
jigsaw, like.
Yeah,
So it's really just having to do with visually. So where is it? Here, proposed. A building that contains 2 dwelling units and is either visually divided vertically so that the dwelling unit appears side by side, but separated by a shared wall extending the entire maximum height of one or both units. Or is visually divided horizontally so that one dwelling unit appears to be above another.
I think what we can do is take almost the sketch that we have, and instead of separating that line all the way through.
Because it was the plane, it was the whole plane of
Is
the
the
whole
whole
thing.
plane, is we just do it the front.
Just the front. So
Just
that's
the
all that
front
really
and
matters.
just highlight the front and highlight
So we
the.
could make a new icon, but I think this language covers that one issue that someone brought up that everyone was like, oh, actually, yeah, we agree with that.
I think we put our own little image in there without it cutting all the way to the back, just
We
cut
can
it
do that.
in. So on the
Yeah,
on the street,
sounds
it looks
good.
like they're side by
Sure.
side, but they can go.
They
Yeah.
can get
Cross that
bigger
line.
Do we have a definition, what is the minimum requirement for a dwelling unit? i.e. you have to have cooking facilities, bathing facilities.
That's building
That's
code,
building zone, okay.
or building code.
It's in there.
Code.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, I just,
Okay, so we got farther than
I
last
could
time.
imagine.
They go down
We
to
technically
sheds.
got farther than.
Okay, we got farther than last time, and, four isn't over. If people hate it next time.
Four is not, four is
No,
not.
I mean, honestly, I
Well,
think,
change 6, can we just say go green on change 6? Can we skip over 5 and just get the greens out of the way?
We could do that, hold on.
Just so next time we're.
okay, good call, good call.
Yeah, can
Is
you
6
review-
agree?
Oh, can we-
I don't even know it off the top of my
site
head.
plan, can we also put in the word electronic copy?
Oh, let's not go
Can we
there.
say
Let's
the
have
20
another meeting.
copies?
We'll be back.
Well,
Fine, okay, so 6. 5 is.
That's a good point, Deb. I think that's really, really
Can we
good
put
point.
in,
Okay, 6 is green, 6 can be green, sure.
six
but I
can be
like-
green, but can we put a
Yeah,
note in
Deb's
about
suggestion's
electronic?
excellent.
Because as much
Yeah.
as I love having large pieces of scrap paper at home, and I am saving those, by the way,
Just recycle it.
no, the big ones are important. I don't get those big sheets of paper. If I want to do a drawing or make a
Oh, you
layout
like-
or
Oh,
something.
you're recycling.
yeah.
You're reusing, yeah.
Yes, I'm great with that. Electronic is just fine if they can't go to Staples and scan it. We got bigger problems if they're hand drafting or
Yeah, yeah.
if they're still. Okay, so change 6 is a green.
What happened to 6?
6 is green.
Yeah.
We're just gonna grab the greens real quick to
I-
close them so
yeah.
we don't come back to
Oh,
them.
wait a second. Oh, and an electronic, sure.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I guess like 20, it's, actually, this is be bolded now.
I don't know if you need to put it in greens, just to wordsmith it, but,
Yeah, I
or
agree with the,
whatever that is. Symbol
yeah.
smithing.
Okay.
And then next time, could you read the date? on-
Yeah, no, I definitely will.
The other thing we're gonna add next time is on the CBD exclusions. We're gonna add that
As part of
as
more-
change, yeah,
11
as,
or whatever.
yep, as change 11.
What was it? Yeah,
Basically,
I have made a note.
That's what you're saying.
yeah,
the CBD,
that's gonna be
yeah.
change 11, because we've gotta put that in this time, because it's like right in our face.
And what it means when it's just, what do you call it?
Oh, there is no change.
There's,
Just repairs.
change time we already did.
right, Repairs.
Yeah, one of
that
them we already
is
did.
problematic.
I just realized that we are not set for our next meeting. We don't have September, so I believe as of today, I think I finally heard from everybody.
I don't have anything for the middle of September onwards, because I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
We'll find out soon.
I'm wondering if I have Betsy's. I will take a look at that, but,
That's your reply.
oh, she was first, so
4
that,
people have at this time, 4 people have.
well, it should be
replied.
6. I also respond.
I don't usually reply because I'm available. I usually would just say, if
Uh-huh.
it's very rare that I'm not available.
Well, basically, we're either meeting,
Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday.
meaning, we're either meeting next week, or maybe we're not meeting next week.
I thought we
got
were. That we
it
weren't meeting
committed
next
to
week.
August 8th,
I
'cause
thought
I've
we
got it.
were committed to August.
You want August?
No, but next week's August 1st.
I'm not here.
That- Yeah, yeah.
I did not want to I wanted to deal with Highland when I was here.
So okay, speaking of Highland, very quickly,
There's-
is that as of right now, the date is August 11th. But it might ended up getting to the 18th
Okay,
anyway, because of everyone's schedule. So we have to review Highland Ave
right.
on the 1st or the 8th,
Okay.
whenever that may be.
We have
I'd
5,
like to do the 1st.
yeah. we
So
have-
I can look,
I thought you're not here.
I'm not here the 8th. I leave the 3rd.
here, I have the poll of everybody here.
The
So
5th has everyone here except for Jackie.
The
The
5th?
5th?
Wrong,
I'm
wrong
sorry,
month.
the 1st of August has everyone here but Jackie. That's
Which is
what it
next week,
says.
which is next week.
Yeah, so that's what it says. And we have one more other meeting I'd like to talk about scheduling very briefly, and that's with the Design Review Committee, but that's a separate issue.
Okay, so yeah, Jackie, can you make next week?
Oh, we're on. I have an out-of-town relative coming.
That's, you can just say, no, I
Yeah.
can't make it.
I mean, I
I'm not- I don't care about that other
could come when
stuff.
they go to sleep.
Bring the relatives.
It's like my second father who's coming from out of town, and I just,
So Heather's not here on the 7th, 8th, 14th, or 15th.
I think we've got to keep
So
meeting.
if we want, it's pretty, if we want Heather here for Highland Ave, then it's the 1st, but then if it's any other time, then, or we might not, but we don't have you on the 1st. So we're having one person not there either way, it
Right.
sounds like. So, I don't know what to do
I
about that.
thought we were aiming for 3 a month anyways.
We're aiming for 3 a month, and we are not aiming. We will have 3 meetings a month, August, September, October.
Oh, we could have 6 in August.
I know, I saw that.
That's
We are
scary.
clearly have too much time on our
I
hands,
want to go
right?
home. Just-
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
well,
Can
then
we
let's just,
figure
all we
that
need
out
to do,
later?
I mean, we just, I
Can we
don't
figure it
want,
out
should I,
tomorrow?
I guess,
Yeah.
Sure.
So we're not on camera
Let's
figuring
do
out a
that.
meeting? Yeah,
then a motion.
okay,
Someone
Let us know.
okay.
Okay. And then I just want to talk about,
And we'll talk about master plan next time, too.
right, and I'd like to talk about getting a meeting with the design review committee
Right.
Okay,
so that we can discuss
Sure.
how we look at projects, and since
Yeah.
2 of their members are going to be on the CBD design review, things that we would
Yeah.
like to rely upon them to provide us some more detail, because.
We'll just
that's
have a
the-
cross-fertilization meeting.
Yes, a cross-fertilization.
Yeah. We should probably have a couple a year anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll work on that.
yeah,
Sooner is better, because all this stuff keeps happening. We
Yeah.
go through CBD,
Yeah.
and there's another project and another
Right.
project, so we really want.
Okay,
So if we can get it in one of our 6 meetings in August, that would be.
so does anybody want to move to adjourn?
So I'll move.
I
Okay,
second.
anybody second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
11 tomorrow.
What? Yeah, yeah,
Let's do it. I'm making
yeah.
11 a.m.
Oh, Brian, you can change number 9 off this.
Thank you,
'cause-
Wayne
Yeah,
Camp.
we already did that, right?
And I want to.
No, but you don't need to keep
Yeah, that
printing
is a
it.
waste of paper.
Oh, right.
The curb cut.
I hear you.
Yeah, right. And I don't need
All right,
to-
11 a.m.